The timid boy was forcefully sent by his parents to the most notorious delinquent academy. He thought he would soon face campus bullying, but to his surprise, all the delinquent students here were warm and friendly, even fighting over who would show him around the school. The campus was peaceful and harmonious, making the boy begin to look forward to a happy future. But he never expected that after school, his classmates would forcibly drag him to a fighting arena. Every student he had seen on campus during the day was now brawling and venting in the arena. The boy stood there, bewildered, frozen in place. The student council president noticed the new arrival and smiled as he explained. The violence at this academy is only allowed to be released in this specially designated fighting arena. Any form of bullying is strictly forbidden on school grounds. Here, you can enjoy a pure school life, and also experience the thrill of battle. As soon as he finished speaking, the student council president pushed him directly onto the fighting stage. His opponent was Kang In-hae, the muscular top dog of the first-year class. Kang In-hae charged at him, face full of excitement, while cold sweat broke out all over the boy. After years of being a timid wimp, he was already terrified of these delinquents. In his panic, he suddenly spat right onto Kang In-hae's face. The whole arena instantly fell silent. The students were all stunned, then erupted into laughter. The boy completely lost face in front of everyone, ending his welcome party in such a unique way. The next day at school, word of his heroic deed had already spread throughout the campus. Knowing he was no match for fighting, the boy took the initiative to seek out the student council president, Jang Chong, and asked if he could stop going to the fighting arena. He hadn't even finished speaking when his classmates all gave him terrified looks, as if they wanted to warn him about something. At that moment, Jang Chong announced to everyone, "From today on, Lee Gil-soo will no longer be protected by the fighting arena." With that, he turned and walked away. Alone in his classroom, Lee Gil-soo kept pondering what protection by the fighting arena actually meant. Just then, Kang In-hae, the one he'd spat on yesterday, showed up with his cronies, grabbed his head, and slammed it hard against the desk, giving him a very real explanation. From that day on, Lee Gil-soo became the only one in the entire school who could be bullied at will, the punching bag for everyone. After a whole week of torment, Lee Gil-soo finally couldn't stand it anymore. He went to his homeroom teacher to request a leave of absence, thinking that would put an end to everything. But just as he reached the school gate, Jang Chong blocked his path, sneering coldly. "Someone like you is truly a useless waste. Do you really think dropping out will let you escape bullying? Cowards like you will always be someone else's punching bag. Because you've never even had the will to protect yourself." After this scolding, Lee Gil-soo thought he could finally be done with it all. But on his way home, he ran into Kang In-hae waiting for him. "You little punk, how dare you try to drop out without asking your master? Who's going to run errands for me or be my punching bag?" Before he finished speaking, Kang In-hae dragged Lee Gil-soo into a deserted alley and beat him up to vent his anger. Afterward, he pulled out his phone, recited Lee Gil-soo's home address word for word, and threatened with a wicked grin that he'd be dropping by to play with him often from now on. Upon hearing this, Lee Gil-soo's face turned pale with terror. He furiously demanded to know what Kang In-hae really wanted. But Kang In-hae just grabbed his face and coldly warned, "If you dare fight back again, I'll send these pictures of you getting beaten all over the place." Lee Gil-soo couldn't understand. He was so close to escaping this hell. Why wouldn't these bastards just let him go? In the depths of terror and despair, he finally understood what Jang Chong had told him before: if you want to protect yourself, you have to fight back bravely. With a furious roar, the fire in Lee Gil-soo's chest exploded. He lunged forward, sinking his teeth hard into Kang In-hae's hand. Kang screamed in pain, then angrily punched Lee, knocking him to the ground. Lee Gil-soo wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and sneered, "So you know what pain feels like after all. People like you, even if I die, I'll drag you down to hell with me." Facing the oncoming thugs, Lee Gil-soo knew he was outnumbered. Without hesitation, he flung the handful of sand he'd hidden in his palm, then turned and bolted toward the fighting arena in the chaos. The moment he set foot inside, Lee Gil-soo roared his challenge, a fair, one-on-one fight with the pursuing Kang In-hae. Jang Chong smiled faintly and immediately ordered the area cleared. The instant both men stepped onto the stage, the whole place came alive. No one expected Kang In-hae to be so terrifying. From the very start, Lee Gil-soo was battered so badly he could barely fight back. But even bloodied and bruised, he locked his eyes on Kang In-hae, refusing to back down. Kang, embarrassed and enraged, lashed out with a swift kick, sending Lee Gil-soo sprawling across the floor, then looked down at him with a triumphant smirk. He was sure no one could withstand a kick like that. But just as he turned to leave, Lee Gil-soo, stubborn as a cockroach, dragged himself up from the ground once more. Kang In-hae, losing patience, clenched his fist and warned, "Stop trying to act tough. If this keeps up, I really will beat you to death." Lee Gil-soo gritted his teeth. "Compared to what I've been through before, This pain is nothing. At that moment, he suddenly rushed forward, grabbed Kang In-hye in a bear hug, and slammed him to the ground, raising his fist to strike. But unexpectedly, Kang In-hye twisted free and landed a heavy blow of his own. That punch is way too slow. When do you think you'll ever land a hit on me? Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo's rage boiled over. He might not have the strength, but he had the will to fight to the end. Without hesitation, he lowered his head and rammed straight into Kang In-hye's skull. Caught off guard, Kang In-hye was furious. He lashed out with a kick, sending Lee Gil-soo flying again, then glared at him through clenched teeth. He was ready to put an end to this farce as quickly as possible. But just then, a flash of red flickered in Lee Gil-soo's eyes. He suddenly realized that the bullies he'd always feared weren't so terrifying after all. How laughable, he'd let these losers push him around for so long. Shame and anger twisted inside him. He raised his fist to strike back, but in the next instant, Kang In-hye's fist crashed into his jaw. Lee Gil-soo hit the ground hard and lost consciousness. When he came to, he saw Jang Chong waiting by the fighting arena. Then Jang Chong told him that this would be his last chance. After his suspension, Lee Gil-soo would be banned from the fighting arena. Lee Gil-soo fell into deep thought. His cowardice had always made him a target for bullies. Even after transferring here, he was still toyed with by Kang In-hye. Without hesitation, he shouted to Jang Chong, "I've decided not to suspend my studies. Please teach me how to become strong." Jang Chong grinned widely. Training the weak is also the duty of the student council president. No sooner had he spoken than he suddenly punched Lee Gil-soo in the stomach. Watching Lee Gil-soo's pained expression, Jang Chong sneered. "Can't handle just this much? The training has only just begun." The next day, Lee Gil-soo returned to school clutching his still aching stomach, recalling Jang Chong's instructions from the night before, come find him whenever he had free time. A sense of dread weighed on his heart. And just then, he ran into the person he hated most, Kang In-hye. To make matters worse, Kang In-hye even threatened him. "Don't get cocky, or next time I really will kill you." That sentence instantly ignited the fury in Lee Gil-soo's chest. He made a silent vow to become stronger, to crush these scum with his own hands. The bell rang for the end of class. Just as Lee Gil-soo arrived at the rooftop to start his training, Jang Chong landed another punch that made him cough up blood. From that day on, Lee Gil-soo was beaten up hundreds of times every day. Even when he was so dizzy he could barely stand, giving up never crossed his mind. After being ambushed last time, Kang In-hye often went to the fighting arena to lie in wait for Lee Gil-soo, but never managed to catch him. To Kang In-hye, this was as good as admitting defeat. So, a malicious idea took root. If Lee Gil-soo wouldn't play the punching bag, he'd use the rule that forbade declining fight invitations to drag all those onlookers into the fray, making the fighting arena his own playground. Meanwhile, completely unaware, Lee Gil-soo trained hard by day and pushed his physical limits by night, desperate to return to the arena and take on Kang In-hye in a fair fight. Just then, a motorcycle suddenly sped toward him, grazing his arm. Moments later, a gang of bikers blocked his path. Their leader, a man in black with his hands in his pockets, strode forward. "You've damaged my beloved bike, let's make it cheap, just pay 6 million. Lee Gil-soo stared at him in disbelief, eyes wide. Before he could protest, the man in black smashed a fist into his face. As the threats continued, Lee Gil-soo suddenly realized he wasn't the slightest bit afraid. He flung the man's arm aside and, without hesitation, swung a punch straight at the guy's face. If he could face monsters like Jang Chong, thugs like these were nothing. But in the next instant, his wrist was gripped in a vice-like hold. The man in black sneered, as if to say, "Is that supposed to tickle me?" Lee Gil-soo's face froze in shock. In his panic, he started flailing wildly. All he'd learned lately was how to take a beating. He had no idea how to fight back. Within moments, he was subdued by a flying kick from the man in black. The guy even slipped on brass knuckles, raising his fist to teach Lee Gil-soo a harsh lesson. Despair washed over Lee Gil-soo. But to his surprise, a figure suddenly dropped down from above, driving a knee into the man in black and sending blood streaming from his nose. When Lee Gil-soo saw who it was, he was stunned. It was Jin Do-il, the one who'd first taken him to the fighting arena. Jin Do-il waved in greeting, grinning as he said, "I knew it was you." Before Lee Gil-soo could reply, he caught a glimpse of a man in red lunging for a sneak attack. He dodged swiftly, spun, and landed a punch squarely on the attacker's face. At that moment, the bikers suddenly noticed that Jin Do-il was wearing the Yukmun Guan High School uniform. Sensing things had gone awry, the leader quickly gathered his crew and retreated, cursing as they went, "Just our luck, running into someone from Yukmun Guan today." After saying this, he hopped on his motorcycle and sped off, leaving nothing behind but a trail of exhaust. Jin Do-il comforted Lee Gil-soo, "Don't lose heart over what just happened. Being able to fight back in that situation was already impressive. When he found out that Lee Gil-soo was receiving special training from Jang Chong, he said enviously, "Senior Jang doesn't teach just anyone. You really have to treasure this opportunity." At that moment, Lee Gil-soo recalled how that group had suddenly retreated, and couldn't help but ask Jin Do-il what was going on. Jin Do-il explained with a smile, "That's perfectly normal. Our school used to be notorious as a school for delinquents, where campus violence ran rampant. Things only changed when Senior Jang showed up. He straightened out the entire school on his own, founded the fighting arena, and established new rules. Back then, anyone could get into a fight whenever they wanted. Now, all disputes have to be settled one-on-one in the ring, according to the rules. But if the fighting arena or Senior Jang were ever gone, the school might turn into hell again. After all, there are plenty of people just waiting to watch the chaos." But what they didn't know was that, at that very moment, trouble was already brewing inside the fighting arena. Kang In-hae had sent his lackey, Park Yong-go, into the arena first, picking on the timid ones with all sorts of ridiculous excuses. If anyone was too scared to fight, he'd bring up the rule, no one can refuse a challenge in the fighting arena, and force them into the ring to be punching bags. Once Park Yong-go had vented his anger, Kang In-hae took off his shirt, ready to step in himself. At that moment, a guy with a middle part laughed from the audience. "Who'd dare fight Kang In-hae?" No sooner had he said it than Kang In-hae fixed him with a glare. The middle-parted guy panicked instantly. He'd never even spoken to Kang In-hae. How did he suddenly get singled out? Kang In-hae sneered, "I just don't like the look of you." "What, are you thinking of refusing to fight, like Lee Gil-soo?" Just then, Jang Chong suddenly stormed in, radiating authority. Facing Jang Chong's questioning, Kang In-hae feigned innocence, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. He shot back, "Is there a problem? I don't think I broke any rules." Jang Chong's expression darkened. He saw right through Kang In-hae's little tricks, but only patted him lightly on the shoulder, reminding him not to act rashly. With that, the turmoil in the fighting arena temporarily died down. Afterwards, Lee Gil-soo's training went on as usual. But gradually, he stopped dodging Jang Chong's iron fists, and even began to fight back. He realized that if he wanted to win, he couldn't just take a beating. Even if he couldn't land a hit, it was better than being a passive punching bag. Just then, Jang Chong suddenly paused, grinning wickedly as he told Lee Gil-soo to follow him somewhere. The two of them arrived at an abandoned little hut. Lee Gil-soo pushed open the door and saw a human-shaped punching machine standing in the middle of the room. Jang Chong immediately assumed a fighting stance. "This is your phase 2 training. Watch closely, I'm only showing you once." He planted his feet shoulder-width apart, moved nimbly, jabbed quickly with his lead hand, then twisted his waist to add power. With that, he landed a heavy punch on the dummy. The machine instantly began to smoke. Lee Gil-soo stared in disbelief, then, full of confidence, followed the steps and threw a punch at the dummy's chin. But to his surprise, the score on the machine didn't budge an inch. Jang Chong followed up with another heavy blow, and only then did the score change from 1 to 2. Pointing at the punching machine, Jang Chong said, "This thing's old and worn out. It only responds if you hit hard enough. So, until you reach 9,999 points, don't show your face to me again." After that, during every break, Lee Gil-soo practiced his punches non-stop, and as a result, his appetite soared. One day, while he was wolfing down bowls of rice, Park Yong-go suddenly showed up. He deliberately slammed his tray down on Lee Gil-soo's head, then pretended to pat him on the back in an exaggeratedly friendly way. Lee Gil-soo was so furious he clenched his teeth, stood up, and grabbed Park Yong-go's arm in a death grip. Park Yong-go kept belittling him, and Lee Gil-soo struggled to keep his anger in check. He remembered Jang Chong's warning, no stepping into the ring before training is over. But these people had already disregarded the rules, openly provoking him outside the arena. Lee Gil-soo couldn't take it anymore. He balled his fists, deciding he wouldn't follow that order any longer. Just then, Jin Do-il charged over and smashed his tray hard into Park Yong-go's face. "You bastard, there's a limit to how much trouble you can make." Seeing Park Yong-go about to explode, Jin Do-il quickly smiled and explained, "Sorry, really. This isn't school bullying, just slipped my hand, that's all." Then Jin Do-il's expression turned cold as he issued Park Yong-go a direct invitation to fight that night. Lee Gil-soo felt a little guilty, thinking he'd gotten Jin Do-il into trouble. But Jin Do-il just smiled and said he wasn't fighting Park Yong-go for Lee Gil-soo's sake, he simply couldn't stand the way those guys were stirring up trouble in the arena. Lately, Kang In-hae and his group had been targeting the weak, bullying them one-sidedly. If the victims were afraid, they'd threaten them by bringing up how Lee Gil-soo had refused to take part in the arena's initiation ceremony. After learning the truth, Lee Gil-soo was so angry he ground his teeth, but he was also confused. Why did Jin Do-il care so much about the arena? With his skill, the ring shouldn't matter to him at all. When asked, Jin Do-il spoke of a past he rarely mentioned. As a child, he'd been overweight and timid, bullied for years. Until one day, a stranger saved him and handed him a flyer for a boxing gym. In that moment, his life changed forever. That man turned out to be the gym's owner. From that day on, the owner trained with him every day. With his fists, he was finally no longer bullied. To him, the arena is a place where everyone can compete fairly, no bullying, no oppression. That's why he fights so hard to protect it. That night, Jin Do-il and Park Yong-go stepped onto the ring as agreed. At the referee's signal, the confident Park Yong-go threw the first punch, but every attack was deftly dodged. Before he even knew what was happening, Jin Do-il landed a heavy blow. Park Yong-go was shocked. Jin Do-il was even faster than he'd expected. Did he have a boxing background? But soon Park Yong-go realized that, though Jin Do-il's punches were quick, they were as soft as cotton. His confidence returned, and he crouched low, ready to land a fatal blow to Jin Do-il's abdomen. Unexpectedly, Jin Do-il's fist was even faster, smashing right into Park Yong-go's chin, sending blood flying. It turned out, everything had been a trap set by Jin Do-il. He'd deliberately hidden his strength, luring Park Yong-go into underestimating him, then suddenly unleashed a heavy punch. In the stands, Lee Gil-soo was beside himself with excitement. Jin Do-il really was impressive. But someone behind him said that Park Yong-go had never lost before, and that Jin Do-il might not win so easily this time. A surge of unease welled up in Lee Gil-soo's heart. Back in the arena, Park Yong-go launched a wild counterattack, but no matter what move he tried, he couldn't land a hit. Jin Do-il sent him flying with a single punch. Jin Do-il's face showed a smug expression, but Park Yong-go suddenly grinned, staggered to his feet, and sharply lifted his left leg, shifting into a fighting stance. Jin Do-il recognized at once that it was a kick. He tried to counterattack in the same way, but a sudden bolt of pain shot through his leg. Seeing this, he quickly retreated. At that moment, Park Yong-go's face was alight with excitement. He lifted his leg again and unleashed his strongest kick. Jin Do-il felt as if he'd been struck by a steel pipe and crashed hard to the ground. This guy's strength was simply incomprehensible. Park Yong-go pressed the advantage, and when Jin Do-il raised his arms to defend, he was kicked so hard his bones cracked. His fists nearly lost all strength and he instantly became Park Yong-go's punching bag. He couldn't find even the slightest chance to counterattack, forced to watch helplessly as that iron-like leg came swinging at him again. In the end, Jin Do-il completely lost the ability to resist. Just as Park Yong-go was about to deliver a fatal kick, the referee sprang forward, blocking the attack in time. Inspector Hyo Gun-hang announced with a dark expression. The opponent has lost the ability to fight. Any further action will be considered a foul. Park Yong-go could only leave the ring reluctantly, but not without taunting Lee Gil-soo on his way out. Long time no see, coward. Next time it'll be your turn to get beat up. After this match, Jin Do-il felt deeply ashamed, thinking his defeat had only fueled the other side's arrogance. Lee Gil-soo tried to comfort him. Don't blame yourself. No one expected Park Yong-go to have a move like that. After taking Jin Do-il downstairs to his building, Lee Gil-soo found an excuse to leave in a hurry and headed straight for the little hut. He had to get stronger as quickly as possible. Seeing his friend get bullied while he was powerless to help, that feeling was unbearable. So even if he failed thousands of times, he was determined to succeed. Gradually, Lee Gil-soo noticed that he was too light and lacked strength. Maybe he should widen his stance a little? To make his punches more powerful, he needed to find that feeling of swinging all out, like when he was hitting a bat. Sure enough, after landing a heavy blow on the dummy this time, the score changed like never before. So he kept training punch after punch with this technique, fighting from night till dawn, until his fists were a bloody mess. At last, the score on the machine froze at 9,999. Meanwhile, Park Yong-go noticed that Lee Gil-soo hadn't come to school that day and suggested they check on him. To his surprise, Kang In-hae advised him not to bother. Park Yong-go had just defeated Jin Do-il, proving their strength and scaring off all the cowards. If they went after Lee Gil-soo again, it would only make them look petty. Now that they had taken control of the first-year students as planned, it was time to take the next step. Well, long time no see, seniors. Sun Sakyu of the third year looked sullen. What are you little punks up to? Kang In-hae grinned broadly. Of course we're just little punks. You guys were legends during my brother's time. But now, after being overthrown by Jang Chong, you're forced to hide in the backstreets like old men. Publicly mocked, Sun Sakyu was so furious he grabbed Kang In-hae by the throat. Kang In-hae calmly explained, I only said it because I thought it was a shame. Back then you were fighting all alone. But now, things have changed. Now, Kang In-hae had already begun quietly gathering forces, preparing to destroy the fighting arena once and for all. But when Jang Chong faced Hyo Gun-hang, the disciplined captain, Accusing Kang In-hye of maliciously breaking the rules, he only looked helpless. In his eyes, rules were rules. Even if he took charge of the arena, it would be hard to restore things to how they were. Just then, his phone suddenly rang. It was Lee Gil-soo calling. To his surprise, Jang Chong rushed straight to the little hut, thinking Lee Gil-soo was about to give up. But when he saw the score on the boxing machine, he felt a long-lost sense of shock. Even faster than I imagined. Lee Gil-soo wiped the sweat from his face, saying he had no more time to waste. Jang Chong grinned. Then let's move on to the next round of training. But you'd better be mentally prepared. What comes next will be even more dangerous than before. Before he could finish his sentence, Lee Gil-soo suddenly collapsed into Jang Chong's arms and immediately fell into a deep sleep. After a full day's rest, Lee Gil-soo followed the directions to a construction site. As he cautiously took in the gloomy surroundings, Jang Chong suddenly appeared behind him, his face serious. Back when Yukmun Guan was trying to dominate, they made a lot of enemies. One of them is Jinsang High School, which hangs out here. Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. He hadn't expected Jang Chong to bring him straight into enemy territory. Seizing the moment, Jang Chong slammed the iron door shut, even locking it, and said with a mischievous grin, "The door on the other side is open. See if you can make it out by yourself. There's no better teacher than real combat." Seeing Jang Chong just walk away, Lee Gil-soo panicked and pounded on the iron door. Right at that moment, the roar of motorcycles came from behind. Within seconds, he was surrounded by a crowd. As the men in black approached, Lee Gil-soo instantly recognized the one whom Jin Do-il had chased off last time. This time, the man carried a pair of brass knuckles and sneered, "Loser, you're not getting away this time." With that, he grabbed Lee Gil-soo's head and taunted him by rapping his face with a fist. But before he knew it, Lee Gil-soo fell into a fighting stance, and landed a light punch on him. While the man in black was still stunned, Lee Gil-soo followed up with a heavy blow that sent blood streaming from his nose. Just as Lee Gil-soo was starting to feel confident in his fists, the man snapped back to his senses and counterattacked, landing a punch on Lee Gil-soo's head. But at this level, it was nothing more than a tickle to Lee Gil-soo. He swung back, sending the man in black flying. Seeing their boss get beaten, the lackeys rushed forward, only to be met by Lee Gil-soo's fist, which sent them flying 3 meters away. The man in black lay on the ground, badly wounded, unable to comprehend how the loser he used to pin down had become so strong in just a few days. He stared at Lee Gil-soo, who was only slightly out of breath. At that moment, the gang's female ringleader, undaunted, started cursing at Lee Gil-soo. Her thunderous voice quickly summoned a large group of her cronies. Dozens of fierce gangsters closed in, making things tricky for Lee Gil-soo. But soon, he came up with a brilliant idea. He snatched the man in black's beloved motorcycle, twisted the throttle to the max. While the gangsters were still stunned, he charged out on the bike, then let go in the middle of the crowd, sending the motorcycle crashing into them. The gangsters scattered in terror at the sudden onslaught. Lee Gil-soo seized the chaos to charge forward, knocking down a thug blocking his way with a single punch, then desperately sprinted toward the back door. He knew all too well that if he wanted to step into the fighting arena and go one-on-one with Kang In-hye's crew, he had to give it everything he had. He absolutely couldn't allow himself to flee in disgrace. So, as he passed a building, a thought flashed through his mind: the stairwell could give him a shot at a one-on-one fight. The thugs chased after him up the stairs, only to find Lee Gil-soo already waiting on a narrow landing, ready to strike. Thinking he was cornered, the group surged forward all at once. But the one in the lead was knocked down by a single blow. In the cramped stairwell, Lee Gil-soo held the high ground, completely controlling the situation. The thugs rushing up became not only perfect punching bags, but also stumbling blocks for each other. Seeing their fear mount, and his own momentum peaking, Lee Gil-soo prepared to head downstairs and take them out again. But just then, a bowl suddenly flew from behind, smashing into his head. Immediately after, a purple-haired man leapt down from above, landing a fierce kick that sent Lee Gil-soo tumbling down the stairs. Lee Gil-soo had never expected anyone to be hiding upstairs. He swung back with a punch, but his opponent moved like lightning, landing a kick to his head first. The searing pain told Lee Gil-soo that this guy wasn't just another thug. Seizing the moment, the purple-haired man barked to his underlings, "Take him down in 10 minutes. At his command, the thugs swarmed over, frantically kicking and beating the fallen Lee Gil-soo. But with his near superhuman resilience, their blows barely fazed him. Knowing he couldn't win by brute force, he broke free with all his might and charged downstairs. Just as the purple-haired man was about to leave, Lee Gil-soo lunged, headbutting the man and locking onto his head, then rolled away to finally put some distance between them. The fierce fight had his blood boiling. He dashed out of the building at once. Just as he was about to escape through the back door, a motorcycle suddenly roared up behind him, blocking his way. Even more surprising, the bike was dragging along the black-clad man he'd knocked out earlier. Facing the stunned Lee Gil-soo, the boss, Hwang Hyuk-jin, licked his lips and said, "So you managed to take down all my useless men, but you're actually pretty cute. I just love playing with cute things like you." No sooner had he spoken than the thugs Lee Gil-soo had shaken off earlier caught up, cutting off his escape. The purple-haired man, seeing Hwang Hyuk-jin, immediately greeted him nervously and patted his chest, promising to deal with Lee Gil-soo, who'd trespassed on their turf. But Hwang Hyuk-jin's eyes turned cold as he warned, "He's my prey. You useless lot, I'll be sure to take care of you later." The purple-haired man fell silent at once. Meanwhile, Lee Gil-soo fixed his gaze on the pervert before him, sizing him up carefully. He was shorter than Lee Gil-soo, not as bulky as Jang Chong, maybe there was a chance. Decision made, Lee Gil-soo charged forward without hesitation. But to his shock, Hwang Hyuk-jin dodged easily and countered, hoisting Lee Gil-soo up with his bare hands, and slamming him hard to the ground. The blow was brutal. Lee Gil-soo spat blood on the spot. But before he could even catch his breath, Hwang Hyuk-jin grabbed him with one hand and yanked him up again. He locked his arms around Lee Gil-soo's body, lifted him off the ground, and executed a 180-degree slam, smashing his head against the floor. The intense pain nearly made Lee Gil-soo pass out. The other boys were just about to snicker when cold sweat instantly drenched their backs. They all realized they'd soon be subjected to the same treatment by Hwang Hyuk-jin. Hwang Hyuk-jin tightened his grip around Lee Gil-soo's neck and hoisted him high into the air. But suddenly, Lee Gil-soo kicked him in the face and taunted, "You little shorty, always calling others cute, but actually, you're the cutest one here." Hwang Hyuk-jin was stunned. He couldn't believe someone dared to call him cute to his face. The gangsters nearby trembled in terror, convinced Lee Gil-soo was about to get beaten to death. Rumor had it that Hwang Hyuk-jin had been bullied as a child for being short, so calling him cutie was strictly forbidden, otherwise, the consequences would be dire. At that moment, Hwang Hyuk-jin suddenly let go and set Lee Gil-soo down. Lee Gil-soo clenched his fists, ready to strike back, but before he could react, Hwang Hyuk-jin lunged again, pinning him to the ground and locking his neck tightly between his legs. Lee Gil-soo struggled to breathe, trapped as if by a giant python, unable to move. Then, Hwang Hyuk-jin grabbed his head and rained down blows. Seeing Lee Gil-soo lying there half dead, Hwang Hyuk-jin stuck his tongue out smugly and asked, "Do you still think I'm cute now?" Just then, on the verge of suffocation, Lee Gil-soo managed to hoist Hwang Hyuk-jin onto his back. Years of hardship had given him the strength to muster every ounce of energy. Hwang Hyuk-jin, excited, slipped behind Lee Gil-soo and applied a rear naked choke. As his body was pulled tight, Lee Gil-soo felt a suffocation 100 times worse than before. Within seconds, he blacked out and collapsed on the floor. Hwang Hyuk-jin beamed with excitement at his conquered prey, then stood up and dragged Lee Gil-soo away to continue tormenting him. But to everyone's shock, Lee Gil-soo miraculously opened his eyes. It turned out he'd been bullied as a kid, and his most practiced game was the choking game. He'd later discovered that as long as he kept a finger's width of space to protect his carotid artery, he wouldn't actually lose consciousness. As he was dragged along, Lee Gil-soo felt a stone, grabbed it, and swung his fist with all his pent-up rage. Taking advantage of the moment Hwang Hyuk-jin fell, Lee Gil-soo scrambled desperately toward the back door. Just as he was about to escape, Hwang Hyuk-jin, furious, charged after him. He was about to be caught again when, suddenly, Jang Chong appeared at the door, exuding a menacing aura and blocking the entrance like an embodiment of evil. He warned Hwang Hyuk-jin, "If you lay another finger on him, you'll be challenging every student in Yukmun Guan." Unexpectedly, Hwang Hyuk-jin only grew more defiant. "I've been wanting to fight you for a long time." He stuck out his tongue, brimming with confidence, and charged, only to be met by Jang Chong's fist smashing into his face, sending him flying back into the room, unconscious. Watching Lee Gil-soo step through the iron gate, Jang Chong smiled with satisfaction. Now, only the final special training remained. "Remember to find me on the rooftop tomorrow." But the next morning, as soon as Lee Gil-soo arrived at school, he saw Park Yongo bullying Jin Do-il. He rushed forward to block the attack and, unable to hold back any longer, challenged Park Yongo, "Meet me at the arena after school. I want to fight you." Park Yongo hadn't expected this kid to provoke him so directly. He sneered on the spot, "I'll show you what the real world is like." Night soon fell, and the arena was packed, the atmosphere more electric than ever. On the ring, Park Yongo had been waiting for a while. Seeing Lee Gil-soo still hadn't shown up, he sneered, "Did he get scared and run away?" Just then, Lee Gil-soo appeared on the ring, his head freshly shaved, a sign of his determination. This boy, once mocked as a wimp, was about to face a Muay Thai master head-on for the first time. Amazingly, he stuck out his butt, crazily inviting his opponent to kick him. Such a bizarre move sent the crowd into fits of laughter. But no one realized that Lee Gil-soo did this because, when he was kicked earlier, he had sensed something hard, like a pen, hidden in his opponent's shin. If he took a direct hit, his bones could break at any moment. Just as he was intently watching his opponent's legs, trying to confirm his suspicion, Park Yong-go fighter suddenly switched tactics, landing a surprise punch to Lee Gil-soo's head, briefly knocking him out. Park Yong-go seized the chance, raising his leg high to attack again. But he never expected Lee Gil-soo to grab his leg in a death grip. In a flash, Lee Gil-soo used his opponent's momentum to slam him viciously to the ground. Seeing the bulge in Park Yong-go's shin, Lee Gil-soo abruptly tore open his pant leg, revealing a steel plate strapped to his calf. The entire audience erupted in shock, outraged that someone would hide a weapon, and began hurling insults at Park Yong-go for his underhandedness. The referee, seeing this, asked the founder, Jang Chong, if the match should be paused. But Jang Chong just smiled and told the referee to step down, saying, "It'll be over soon anyway." By now, having confirmed his suspicion, Lee Gil-soo was furious. He unleashed a savage beating on Park Yong-go, nearly pounding him half to death. Looking at Park Yong-go's battered appearance, Lee Gil-soo understood that look of despair better than anyone. He, too, had once been beaten by these thugs until he was like a dog, his eyes full of fear and helplessness. But that weak Lee Gil-soo was gone for good. From now on, anyone who bullied him would be completely crushed by his fists. As Park Yong-go's will broke, Lee Gil-soo secured an overwhelming victory to the roar of the crowd. When Park Yong-go came to, he couldn't believe he'd been taken down by a rookie. He tried to stand, only to see his boss, Kang In-hae, walking straight out of the crowd. He wanted to call out, but Kang's cold, indifferent gaze left him frozen. Meanwhile, the audience, seeing Park Yong-go regain consciousness, began pelting him with trash and stones. But to their surprise, Lee Gil-soo suddenly stepped forward, setting aside all grudges, and reached out to help him up. He admitted that, although he wanted badly to beat up the cheating Park Yong-go, the rules of the arena held him back for now. He'd just have to wait for a fair fight next time. As the two were about to make peace, a large hand suddenly appeared, yanking Park Yong-go's hair. It was Sun Sakyu, the boss of the third years, who mocked Park for being a worthless loser, asking how he could possibly shake hands with his opponent. With that, he strode provocatively toward Jang Chong, the founder of the arena, vowing to destroy the place himself and return Guan to the days when thugs ruled the school. Jang Chong just sneered at this, thinking Sun Sakyu had already given up, only daring to hide like a rat in the sewers. Since he still dared to challenge him, Jang Chong was ready to shatter Sun Sakyu's unrealistic fantasies once and for all. The two stepped onto the ring as opponents, and the crowd below instantly went wild, buzzing with excitement. Lee Gil-soo, puzzled, asked Jin Do-il out of curiosity, and only then did he learn that before the fighting arena was founded, Sun Sakyu was the only person who could challenge Jang Chong for the title of Guan's strongest. As soon as Sun Sakyu finished warming up, he suddenly charged forward, launching the first attack. In an instant, the collision of their strength sent out a massive shockwave, blasting the nearest spectators clear off their feet. When the dust settled, Sun Sakyu realized he hadn't even touched a single hair on Jang Chong's head. Enraged, he exploded into a flurry of attacks. Lee Gil-soo was amazed to see that, despite Sun Sakyu's massive build, his movements were lightning fast. He couldn't help but ask Jin Do-il, with worry, what would happen if Senior Jang Chong lost. Jin Do-il's expression grew solemn. He said that the fighting arena might be dissolved, and Guan would once again become a living hell. After all, Sun Sakyu was the right-hand man of Kang Han-hae. No sooner had he spoken than Sun Sakyu, frustrated by repeated failures, began to lose control. With all his strength, he struck with his palm, and for the first time, left a bloody mark on Jang Chong's face. Sensing victory was near, he immediately unleashed a ferocious barrage, every blow landing squarely on Jang Chong, then followed by a heavy punch that sent Jang Chong crashing to the ground. The sudden reversal made Lee Gil-soo's heart race, and even the always calm Jin Do-il started to panic. Rumor had it that Sun Sakyu's advantage was his raw power, while Senior Jang Chong was famed for his technique. But now it seemed Sun Sakyu was overpowering Jang Chong in every aspect. At that moment, Sun Sakyu grinned smugly to himself, surprised that those little pills he'd been given had really made him feel reborn. Drunk with his own success, he raised his massive leg high, ready to finish Jang Chong off with one final blow. Just then, a heavy fist suddenly smashed into his face. Sun Sakyu was sent flying by Jang Chong, crashing into the fence. Before he could react, Jang Chong pressed the attack like a hurricane, landing a crushing blow as his aura exploded outward, exuding an overwhelming presence. Only then did Sun Sakyu realize that Jang Chong had deliberately lured him into letting his guard down. but it was already too late. With Jang Chong's final strike, Sun Sakyu was instantly sent flying out of the ring, cutting a shockwave through the crowd, and after hitting the ground, he lay motionless, immediately passing out. The audience erupted in cheers at the sight, but Jang Chong turned away with a grave expression, blocking Park Yango, who was trying to sneak away in the chaos. With an air of authority, he declared that since Park had broken the rules, he would have to accept the punishment he deserved, and ordered Park Yango to get down and take his beating. With that, he brandished an iron rod. Park Yango was so terrified at the sight that his soul nearly left his body. If a monster like Jang Chong beat him with an iron rod, he was sure he wouldn't survive. In his panic, he forgot all about his dignity, dropping to his knees and begging for mercy, swearing he hadn't broken the rules on purpose, promising it would never happen again. But Jang Chong was unmoved, ordering him once more to get down immediately. With no choice left, Park Yango clung to Jang Chong's leg and wailed, pitifully explaining that he'd been bullied since childhood, that he only strapped steel plates to his legs to protect himself, and begged Jang Chong to forgive him this time, since he was a victim too. Seeing Jang Chong suddenly bend down, Park Yango thought he was about to be forgiven, only to find Jang Chong even angrier. "You brat, I told you to get down." At that shout, Park Yango collapsed to the ground in terror, crying uncontrollably. He had never encountered someone so frightening. Jang Chong raised the iron rod high, and the steel pipe came whistling down. Park Yango's fear reached its peak, and he actually wet himself. Seeing this, Jang Chong paused, holding back his hand, and only issued a cold warning: "This kind of mercy won't come a second time." With that, he stomped his foot, and shouted to the whole crowd, "All of you, listen up. Today, you should all understand what kind of place the fighting arena is. Anyone who breaks the rules or brings violence into the school, as long as I'm here, I will never tolerate it. So everyone, give it your all, don't worry, because here, even those who used to be timid and afraid of fighting can win glory fairly with their own fists. That is the very purpose of our Yukmun Guan's arena." That concludes my speech as the president of Yukmun Guan High School Student Council. The next day arrived, and Jang Chong was training on the school rooftop. Lee Gil-soo made a special trip to the rooftop to thank him. He said that if it hadn't been for Jang Chong's special training before his match with Piss-Scared Guy, where he taught him the crucial beginner's lesson in fighting, to give up defense, close in on the opponent, force them to stop moving, and seize the chance for a decisive blow, he would never have won that match. But Jang Chong only replied calmly that there was no need to thank him, that he was simply doing what was expected of him. Seeing Jang Chong suddenly grow distant, Lee Gil-soo was at a loss for what to do, and couldn't help but ask, "Why did you go so far to help me, senior? And I heard I'm the first student you've ever personally trained?" At these words, Jang Chong paused his training. He replied, "Because I want to prove myself to someone. Thanks to you, I've improved even faster than I imagined. I feel like, when I see him, I'll have a lot to say. And I thank you for sticking with it until now." Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo was a little confused, but still bowed deeply to his senior, grateful for his guidance. He actually wanted to ask what exactly those words meant, but the atmosphere was so unusual that he didn't dare to press further. Time slipped by quietly, and under the arena's dilapidated roof, the commotion grew louder by the day. After Jang Chong's speech, the place became more popular than ever. Every day saw a feast of violence. And Lee Gil-soo changed a great deal through each fierce match. His fists grew stronger, his body gradually adapted to the rhythm of combat. He had fully mastered the skill of ending a fight with a single blow as soon as the chance arose. At the same time, he became thoroughly addicted to the arena. But what he didn't know was that Kang In-hae, who had always wanted to destroy the arena, had just arrived at the prison's visiting room to see the former boss of Yukmun Guan, his older brother. Upon seeing him, his brother immediately sneered and said, "Last time you said you had a way to bring down the arena. How's that going?" Kang In-hae could only reply with a wry smile, "It was all ruined by a coward. The whole plan fell apart. Even Senior Shiyu hadn't expected that he would lose to Jang Chong." As soon as the words left his mouth, the room erupted in raucous laughter. "Looks like that Jang Chong has gotten a lot stronger. But with the master gone, not even a dog should dream of taking over the house." Kang In-hae broke out in a cold sweat and hurried to reassure him, "Don't worry, no matter what, I'll find a way to destroy the fighting arena. Actually, I've just come up with another new idea." Before he could finish, the long-haired man cut him off. "In-hae, a dog leash only works if you put it on the right neck. Just keep doing your own job." With that, he stood up to leave, tossing out casually, "My dad will help reduce my sentence. I'll be out in a few months. Just lay low for now. Once I'm back, everything will sort itself out." Kang In-hae could only nod helplessly. Meanwhile, completely unaware of all this, the young boys were attending a co-ed gathering with Jang Chong's sister. His desperate chugging of soft drinks on his first date immediately caught her attention. After a brief exchange, they both found each other quite interesting. Egged on by the group, everyone decided to move the party to a karaoke bar. As the three boys were about to head in, Eyebrow Bro suddenly patted Jin Do-il on the shoulder, telling the girls to go ahead, while the guys needed to hit the restroom first. Jin Do-il was about to refuse, but Eyebrow Bro's face had already darkened as he snapped, "You brat, during the date just now, why'd you keep messing things up for me?" The two started arguing right there on the street. Feeling awkward as he watched them bicker, Lee Gil-soo simply turned and headed to the karaoke bar alone. On his way there, the image of Jang Chong's sister's adorable face popped into his mind, and he instantly wore a lovesick expression. But he still had no idea that this girl was actually Jang Chong's real sister. Just as he turned into the karaoke bar hallway and looked up, he saw a thug harassing the girl he liked. "Hey little cutie, come hang out with Big Bro, I promise you'll have fun." Lee Gil-soo heard this and immediately shouted, "Stop." The thug glanced over with a sneer, "Your friend here is obviously a wimp. Don't bother with him, come with me. I'm with the Begzan group, you know." Jang Chong's sister felt a sharp pain in her arm and immediately struggled to break free from the thug's grip. Seeing this, the thug got even more excited. "Oh, a little attitude, I like that. If I don't let go, what are you gonna do about it?" But before he could finish, Jang Chong's sister slipped under his arm, grabbed his collar in a flash, and flipped him straight over her shoulder. As he hit the ground, she coolly declared, "Disobedient boys get beat up." With a sickening crack, the thug spat out blood from the fall. Lee Gil-soo stood there, stunned into stone. One of the girls nearby calmly told him, "No need for you to step in. Jangmi may seem cute and gentle, but she's actually a beast. She's been learning martial arts from her brother since she was little. Ordinary punks don't stand a chance. These days, most boys can't even beat her. And her brother? He's the most notorious leader at Thug Academy." Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo stared at Jangmi in shock, wondering if the senior who taught him to fight might actually be Jangmi's brother. The next second, two more thugs appeared behind Jangmi, with the blonde one getting ready to launch a sneak attack. Seeing this, Lee Gil-soo sprang forward and landed a punch right on the blonde's face, sending him flying. He grabbed another thug by the collar and snapped angrily, "It's bad enough to attack from behind, but to sneak up on a girl? You've got no shame at all." With that, he quickly turned to Jangmi, asking with concern if she was hurt. Just then, Eyebrow Bro and Jin Do-il returned from the restroom. Jangmi's best friend pointed behind her, her voice trembling with indignation. They were almost bullied by a gang of thugs just now. Everyone looked in the direction she pointed, only to find that the group had already fled. Once everything was over, Lee Gil-soo transformed into a gallant protector and escorted Jangmi home. Along the way, she was praised for his impressive fighting skills. Lee Gil-soo explained shyly, "It's all thanks to Senior Jang Chong. He's been teaching me." He had barely finished speaking when Jangmi stared at him in shock. "So you're the one my brother's been talking about all this time?" Lee Gil-soo was stunned, unable to believe that Jangmi was actually Jang Chong's little sister. Did that mean all his embarrassing moments had been reported to her brother? Just then, Jangmi suddenly handed him her phone. "From the moment my brother started talking about you, I thought you sounded interesting. Let's keep in touch from now on." Lee Gil-soo took the phone, his face instantly turning red. He never imagined his goddess would actually ask for his contact info. The very next day at school, Lee Gil-soo walked around hugging his phone like a lovesick fool, chatting nonstop with Jangmi whenever he got a free moment. Suddenly, a commotion drew his attention. He saw Park Yong-go, the guy he'd beaten before, kneeling on the ground, begging the boss Kang In-hae for forgiveness. But Kang In-hae spat at him with a face full of contempt, telling this bedwetter to get lost. He added that if it were him, he'd have quit school out of sheer embarrassment long ago. Lee Gil-soo happened to witness the whole scene and was puzzled. He couldn't help asking his friend beside him. He didn't understand why someone like Park Yong-go, who was at least a halfway decent thug, would stoop so low to curry favor with Kang In-hae. Jin Do-il explained that there was a famous company in the area called Gang-un, which was actually a well-disguised gang. They were extremely influential, even able to manipulate the police and some politicians. Kang In-hae, it turned out, was the second son of the gang boss at Gang-un, a ruthless figure born and bred for the underworld. After hearing this, Lee Gil-soo was dumbfounded. No wonder Kang In-hae could throw his weight around at school. Evening came quickly, and Jangmi finished her shift and was getting ready to head home. Suddenly, a woman ran over, crying for help, and threw herself into Jangmi's arms, saying a group of strange men had been chasing her and trying to take advantage of her. Jangmi offered to call the police, but the woman dragged her deep into an alley, insisting they needed to hide first. The next second, the gang of thugs suddenly appeared, blocking the mouth of the alley. Jangmi immediately shouted at them to get lost, telling them to stop harassing innocent people. But just then, the woman behind her pulled out a stun baton, and jabbed it hard into Jangmi's lower back. With a smug grin, the woman said she'd just played a little trick. This gullible girl was so easy to fool. When Jangmi realized the woman was working with the thugs, she clenched her fists in fury. But after being shocked, her body wouldn't even move, let alone fight back. The thugs all broke into lecherous grins. The one with a scorpion tattoo on his face, none other than Baeksan Group cadre Han Jae-hoo, bared his fangs and said, "Hey pretty girl, wanna have some fun with Oppa?" At that moment, a familiar face leaned in, picking up the thread. "I told you before I'm with Baeksan Group, but you had to mess with me. Now watch how our boss deals with you." Only then did Jangmi realize that it was the same group who had harassed her before, coming back for more trouble. Han Jae-hoo suddenly snatched up a wooden club, brandishing it viciously as he prepared to take revenge. Sensing the danger, Jangmi forced herself upright, mustering every ounce of willpower. As the club came swinging down, she just managed to dodge to the side. The woman nearby was surprised by this. "Not bad, you've got some moves. But a pretty toy can be played with a few more times, no problem." With that, she fired up the stun baton again, shocking Jangmi into unconsciousness. She even tapped him a few more times, making sure she was truly out. Then she pleaded with Han Jae-hoo, asking to let her have Jangmi to teach her a lesson. But to her surprise, Han Jae-hoo's eyes suddenly turned cold and vicious. "Did you think I was just letting you have some fun? This woman is valuable, no one touches her." With that, he turned to his underlings, ordering them to stuff Jangmi into a sack and take her back to their secret base immediately. Just as they were about to move, a shadow burst onto the scene. The newcomer swung a fist, sending one of the thugs flying. Everyone was stunned. Lee Gil-soo stood there, face dark, eyes locked on the gang. He was here because half an hour earlier, Jangmi had told him she was going out to sing. Lee Gil-soo had wanted to go with her, but the next moment, she sent him a bizarre message. He sensed something was wrong and raced over like a madman, only to arrive just a moment too late. At that moment, a thug in red shouted from the crowd, "Boss, it's this guy. He messed with us at karaoke bar last time, and he's a student from Yukmun Guan." Hearing this, Han Jae-hoo grinned wickedly, his face full of malice. He had been looking for a chance to deal with the troublemaker from Yukmun Guan, never expecting his target would come straight to him. A chubby underling rushed forward, eager to prove himself. But Lee Gil-soo slipped past his attack with ease, landing a punch that sent the fat guy spitting blood. Next, with thugs attacking from both sides, Lee Gil-soo slammed one aside, then blocked a flying kick with his forearm. He ducked low, and drove a punch straight into his opponent's chin. He realized these guys were even weaker than those at Yukmun Guan. No matter how many came at him, he could still win. But just as he sent the man in red flying with a kick, a wooden club suddenly came crashing toward him. If not for his quick reflexes, Lee Gil-soo's face would have been shredded by the club's spikes. He instantly realized this blonde thug was ruthless, he'd have to be careful. So instead of charging in, he patiently waited for an opening as his opponent pressed the attack. The moment he showed a weak spot, Lee Gil-soo sprang up, shattering the club with a kick, and then unleashed a flurry of punches, driving Han Jae-hoo into a narrow alley. But just as Lee Gil-soo focused all his attention on the fight, Han Jae-hoo suddenly stuck out a foot and tripped him. Lee Gil-soo lost his balance, and toppled right into a woman's arms. The awkward pose lasted a full 2 seconds before he realized what had happened, and hurriedly explained it wasn't on purpose. Unexpectedly, when the woman saw him looking shy, she actually found it adorable. Excited, she raised her stun baton, wanting to show him some love. Just as the stun baton was about to touch Lee Gil-soo, Jangmi suddenly appeared and kicked the weapon out of the woman's hand. The woman asked in surprise, "Weren't you just knocked out? How are you standing again?" Jangmi shook the wooden stick in her hand triumphantly. "Of course, it's because I've got this little treasure." Turns out, when Han Jae-hoo attacked her with the stick earlier, a broken piece of wood had happened to fall right where she could find it. Before the woman could make another move, she'd quietly hidden the stick under her clothes, using an insulator to block the current. Right after, Lee Gil-soo and Jangmi immediately decided to join forces against the gang. Seeing this, Han Jae-hoo couldn't help but sneer, "I didn't want to start a scene, but you're asking for it." But before he could finish, Lee Gil-soo suddenly charged forward, landing a blow right on his forehead, then followed up with a punch to the face. In just a couple of moves, he sent Han Jae-hoo tumbling into a pile of trash. Lee Gil-soo thought he had easily taken care of him, but then heard a cold laugh behind him. Han Jae-hoo climbed out of the garbage, mocking, "That's all you've got? I haven't even gotten serious yet." With that, he popped a pill into his mouth, and lunged at Lee Gil-soo with a burst of speed. Han Jae-hoo swung his fist hard, catching Lee Gil-soo off guard. He took a knee to the chin, and immediately turned into a punching bag, his face getting pummeled out of shape. Just as Han Jae-hoo was sure of his victory, he suddenly noticed Lee Gil-soo frozen in place. Before he could react, Lee Gil-soo grabbed his throat in a flash, taking the chance to hammer his fists into Han's stomach again and again. Watching Han Jae-hoo dangle in his grip like a helpless chick, Lee Gil-soo didn't hesitate. He slammed his head into Han's with a vicious force. Enraged, Han Jae-hoo grappled with him, and the two became a flailing tangle. He never expected this guy to fight even harder than someone on drugs. Finally, with a furious roar, Lee Gil-soo clenched his fist and sent Han Jae-hoo flying several meters with a crushing blow. Then, looking down at the unconscious Han Jae-hoo, Lee Gil-soo spat out a bloody glob. "Idiot. Did you really think I was your punching bag?" No sooner had he finished speaking than Jangmi's applause sounded behind him. "Nice job finishing things up." Before Lee Gil-soo could react, Jangmi grabbed the woman by the collar, her expression dark as she demanded to know why she'd lied to her. Terrified, the woman waved her hands frantically, explaining that she'd only done it for the money Baek Zan Group had paid her. The moment he heard the words Baek Zan Group, Lee Gil-soo understood everything. So, back at the karaoke bar, they'd already gotten into trouble with this group. Determined to get to the bottom of Baek Zan Group, Lee Gil-soo threatened the woman, if she didn't come clean, she could forget about leaving alive. Frightened out of her wits, she spilled everything she knew. It turned out Baek Zan Group was a high school alliance that had suddenly risen to power half a year ago. Though there were plenty of violent gangs in the area, all the big names were scrambling to join Baek Zan Group, making them grow rapidly. At that time, Han Jae-hoo bribed her to lure Jangmi as part of his plan to catch a few students from Yukmun Guan, and earn a chance to join the Five Dragons. Because the Baek Zan Group had already taken over most of the schools in the area, only the northern district where Yukmun Guan was located remained. After the woman finished speaking, she staggered to her feet, indicating she had said everything she knew and wanted to leave first. But after just a few steps, her coat was yanked back violently. With a face full of menace, Jangmi asked where she thought she was going, saying she hadn't finished speaking yet. Then came a merciless beating. After venting his anger, the two of them went home together. Lee Gil-soo felt deeply guilty about what had happened that night. He believed that Baek Zan Group's real target was Yukmun Guan, and that the innocent Jangmi had gotten dragged in as a result. Fortunately, no matter how arrogant those guys got, they still couldn't beat the Yukmun Guan as long as Jang Sr. was holding it up. Upon hearing this, Jangmi burst out laughing, saying her older brother really was quite special, but Lee Gil-soo was just as cool. "Thank you. At this point, I already owe you 2 favors." Lee Gil-soo just smiled knowingly, grateful that he had managed to save Jangmi. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Han Jae-hoo and the others were getting punished one by one. As the ringleader, Han Jae-hoo was kicked to the ground by Guan Tyran, who ranked 5th among the Baek Zan Group's 5 dragons, and was immediately demoted to an ordinary fighter. Looking at Han Jae-hoo's face, full of despair, Guan Tyran sneered and said, "Fighters are pretty interesting too. See you in the arena." At the same time, on the other side, the Thunderstorm gang had just scared off a group of wannabe gangsters who were trying to join. But the boss, Gong Jin Seop, looked even more grim. Because of Baek Zan Group's presence, they couldn't even recruit decent underlings. How were they supposed to survive at this rate? It was then that an uninvited guest, Park Yong-go, appeared. 2 of the henchmen immediately started cursing, calling him trash, asking how he had the nerve to come back. Park Yong-go didn't care at all. Smiling, he said he was there for an interview, and that compared to those cowards who just ran away, he was a much higher level talent. Gong Jin Seop strode up, bristling with hostility. "You're shameless. Why should I take back a traitor who walked out on us?" He reminded Park Yong-go coldly that he had already failed the character test. But Park Yong-go was even more resolute. "You can make me do anything, no matter how dirty or disgusting, I'm ready for it." Faced with someone so eager to defect, a plan instantly formed in Gong Jin Seop's mind. He smiled and asked Park Yong-go if he knew Ma Yun Jian. "That guy's been eyeing our turf lately. Go teach him a lesson. If you do it well, I'll consider letting you back into Thunderstorm." The next day, Park Yong-go went back to school to pack up his things, planning to take a break from school for a while. He didn't expect Lee Gil-soo to call out to him. Lee Gil-soo, looking dead serious, asked why he was leaving. Was it because of the fighting arena? He even tried to persuade him to return to the arena and prove himself. But those words made Park Yong-go snap. Furious, he grabbed Lee Gil-soo and shouted, "You bastard, do you think now that I've ended up like this, your justice has finally been served? You'd better watch your back at night. Because I won't be using that damn fighting arena to teach you a lesson next time, I'll just deal with you out on the street." With that, he stormed off without even taking his things, leaving in a fit of rage. He didn't notice at all that a letter slipped from his back pocket. By the time Lee Gil-soo spotted the letter on the ground, Park Yong-go was already long gone. Night fell. Carrying an iron rod, Park Yong-go went alone to an abandoned gas station. Facing a group of unknown gangsters, he gave them only 2 options: join Thunderstorm, or get lost. As soon as the words left his mouth, the thugs started jeering, heard you used to run with Kang Jin-hae, but now you've been kicked out by them, so you've crawled back to Thunderstorm? With that, two of the thugs swung their wooden bats, planning to teach this street rat a lesson. Luckily, Park Yango reacted quickly, blocking their attack. But just then, another thug seized the chance to sneak up, striking hard at his side. Even so, Park Yango caught that move with ease. Looking at these losers, Park Yango launched a flying kick, sending the two of them sprawling. Then he took off his jacket, telling them not to waste time, and to come at him all at once. While Park Yango was taking on Ma Yun-jian and his gang single-handedly, Kong Jin-sok watched coldly from the sidelines, picked up a photo of himself and Park Yango, flicked his lighter, and burned it without a second thought. The truth was, from the beginning, Kong Jin-sok never intended to keep Park Yango around. He simply saw an opportunity when Park approached him and took advantage of it, using Park to eliminate the other factions. If Park Yango lost, it wouldn't cost him a thing. People like that, use them and toss them away, without a hint of regret. Meanwhile, Park Yango's fight had ended. He'd single-handedly taken down dozens of thugs. Staring at the barely conscious Ma Yun-jian, Park Yango wiped the blood off his face with satisfaction. He'd planned to give them a choice, but now, there was no need. He kicked Ma Yun-jian hard in the face, sending him rolling as far as possible, telling him never to get in his way again. Not long after, Park Yango returned to Thunderstorm, and rumors quickly spread throughout the school that he planned to go to Yukmun Guan and beat up everyone he didn't like. Hearing these rumors, Lee Gil-soo was a little shocked, not expecting Park Yango to drop out so soon. But Jin Do-il found it unsurprising. He only came to school to get Kang Jin-hae's attention. Now that he's been cast aside, it was just a matter of time before he left. Besides, he's always been a loner, never had a single friend around him. Lee Gil-soo fell into thought, suddenly recalling the letter Park Yango had dropped earlier. Following the sender's information from the letter, he found Park Yango's childhood friend, Jang Hae-seon. Lee Gil-soo explained he'd found the letter by chance, and because she didn't know Park Yango's home address, this was the only way she could return it to him. But she admitted, she couldn't hand the letter to Park Yango in person either. Ever since he left the orphanage, she only knew the address of his school. That's why she always sent the letters to the school. Lee Kae-shung was very surprised to hear that Park Yango grew up in an orphanage. With a hint of sadness, Jang Hae-seon spoke slowly, I grew up with Yango Oppa, we were both orphans. When I was a kid, I was always bullied by the older children. Every time, Yango would show up like a hero and chase the bullies away. But the good times didn't last. When people at school found out Yango was an orphan, they started bullying him openly. To protect himself, Yango started hanging out with the Thunderstorm gang. After that, he disappeared for a long time. When he finally came back to see us, he was a completely different person, full of vigor and confidence, bringing a mountain of gifts to the orphanage. At first, I was a little afraid of the changes in him, but seeing how much he still loved the younger kids, I believed that Oppa Yango hadn't really changed at all. At this point, Jang Hae-seon's face was clouded with worry. In the past, Park Yango would visit them every month, always bringing gifts. He hadn't come by recently, and it turned out it was because he dropped out of school. Thinking of this, Jang Hae-seon couldn't hold back her tears. She clutched the envelope tightly and burst into sobs. She was truly terrified that one day the Yango in her memories would vanish, replaced by someone unrecognizable and frightening. Watching her, Lee Gil-soo felt a dull ache in his own heart. Nighttime, on the rooftop of Thunderstorm House. Gong Jin-seop was gripping a wrench, ruthlessly disciplining the subordinates who had failed their mission. When he was done, he patted Park Yango on the shoulder, praising him for still being as sharp as ever, taking care of Ma Yo-jian all on his own. Then he grinned and said, with this, you've paid off your debt of betrayal. But if you want to rejoin Thunderstorm, you'll have to pass even tougher tests. Unexpectedly, Gong Jin-seop changed his mind. Park Yango gritted his teeth in frustration, but this was the only road left for him. Forcing himself to stay calm, he asked, so what do you want me to do? Gong Jin-seop gave a sly smile. Didn't you say you'd do anything? Does that include killing someone? Park Yango froze in shock at these words. Seeing his reaction, Gong Jin-seop suddenly burst out laughing, you actually believed me? With that, he flicked his lighter and, shifting the topic, said to Park Yango, what I want you to do is just as bad as killing someone, set a motorcycle on fire. As he finished, he slapped a thick wad of cash against Park Yango's chest, just the deposit is several million. You won't get opportunities like this often. As long as you pull this off, you're back in Thunderstorm. Faced with this task, Park Yango was deeply conflicted. If anything went wrong, he might end up in juvenile detention. As he walked, torn and uneasy, he unconsciously found himself back at the entrance of the orphanage where he'd grown up. Just as he was blaming himself for being so foolish and was about to leave, Jang Hae-seon called out to him. The two of them went to the swings they used to play on as children. Worriedly, Jang Hae-seon asked him, "Can't you come back to the orphanage, live with us like before?" Hearing this, Park Yong-go let out a sigh. "Thank you, Hae-seon. But by now, it's too late." He stood up after speaking, told Jang Hae-seon to take care of the younger kids, and said he probably wouldn't be able to return for a while. Ignoring her pleas, he left with a look of profound loneliness. The next night, in a parking lot somewhere. In the end, Park Yong-go accepted Gong Jin-seop's assignment. He doused a motorcycle with gasoline, not holding back at all. He looked around, making sure there really were no cameras, just as Gong Jin-seop had promised, then pulled out his lighter to set the fire. At this point, completing the job was his only way forward. But just as he raised his hand to throw the lighter, a bucket of water was suddenly dumped over his head. Lee Gil-soo looked at Park Yong-go's sorry state and couldn't help but curse, "Playing with fire in the middle of the night, aren't you afraid you'll blow yourself up?" As it turned out, 3 hours earlier, Jang Hae-seon had stopped Lee Gil-soo on his way home, crying as she told him Yong-go might be about to do something dangerous, and begged him to stop Yong-go from doing something foolish. So, in order to figure out what Park Yong-go was really up to, Lee Gil-soo followed the clues provided by Jin Do-il and tracked down the place where the Thunderstorm gang was holed up. He found two thugs up on the rooftop and tried to ask about Park Yong-go's whereabouts. When the two refused to speak no matter what, he had no choice but to communicate with his fists, eventually beating the information out of them. Just like that, he managed to stop Park Yong-go's foolish act in time, before disaster could strike. But Park Yong-go was far from happy about it. He grabbed Lee Gil-soo by the collar and shouted angrily, "Do you even understand my life? Who are you to tell me what to do?" Lee Gil-soo, however, responded calmly, "You're right, I don't understand. But someone believes in you, and asked me to help you." Only then did Park Yong-go realize it was Hae-seon who'd been worried about him all along. Lee Gil-soo emphasized again, "I've always believed you're a good person. So don't ruin your own life with your own hands." Park Yong-go hadn't expected Hae-seon would go to such lengths for him. Just as he was about to put down the lighter and walk away, Gong Jin-seop suddenly appeared with a group of men. Turns out he'd been watching Park Yong-go the whole time, secretly recording everything as Park doused gasoline everywhere. For the first time in his life, the underage Park Yong-go tried to commit arson for the gang boss, only to have the whole thing caught on video by the other side. Gong Jin-seop's plan was to pin the arson charge on this lost kid and send him straight to jail. As the lighter was about to fall into the gasoline, a figure suddenly flashed by and kicked it away. It was none other than Jin Do-il, with Eyebrow Bro following behind him. Their timely arrival was all thanks to Lee Gil-soo's foresight. On his way to stop Park Yong-go, he'd also called Jin Do-il and Eyebrow Bro for backup. If he hadn't made those preparations, Park Yong-go's life would have been ruined for good. At that moment, Eyebrow Bro glared at the gang boss who'd made him cancel his date, seething with rage. Clenching his fists, he charged forward, determined to teach these bastards a lesson. But to his surprise, the moment he landed a punch, he almost shattered his own hand. The guy's arm was protected by an iron shield. With just one blow, Eyebrow Bro was knocked to the ground. Seeing this, Jin Do-il immediately tried to rush in and help, but was blocked by someone before he could take a step. Without hesitation, the man launched a rapid-fire assault. Jin Do-il was about to counterattack, when suddenly his face was slashed. He froze for an instant, only to realize the guy's gloves had hidden blades that sprang out. Watching all this unfold, Lee Gil-soo was stunned. He'd never imagined these thugs could be so despicable. Even the one coming after him was wielding 2 iron canes, muttering something in Japanese that he couldn't understand at all. When the Japanese thug charged, Lee Gil-soo instinctively raised his arm to block, but the strength behind the cane was unimaginable. With just a single hit, Lee Gil-soo felt as if his organs were shaking apart. Blood gushed from his mouth, and after taking a blow to the back, he crashed to the ground, temporarily losing all ability to fight back. Seeing this, Gong Jin-seop sneered at Yong-go, "Your friends look like they're in trouble. Not helping out is probably for the best, don't you think?" Before he could finish, Park Yong-go landed a vicious kick on him. But to his surprise, the moment his foot made contact, an uneasy feeling crept into his heart. Gong Jin-seop's jacket slipped off, revealing a bulletproof vest underneath, and brass knuckles on both hands. He'd clearly come prepared. Park Yong-go looked at the smug smile on Gong Jin-seop's face, and immediately launched his most formidable leg technique. But the move had no effect on Gong Jin-seop at all. Instead, he seized the opportunity and knocked Park to the ground with a single punch. Meanwhile, Eyebrow Bro was barely holding on. Continuous defense had left his arms numb. If this went on, he'd completely lose the ability to fight. Just then, he suddenly noticed that his opponent, with a weapon strapped to his arm, always attacked along a diagonal. If he stood against the wall and shrank the attack angle, maybe he could counter it. So, he immediately scrambled up against the fence. Sure enough, seeing this, his opponent was at a loss, unable to find an opening. On the other side, Jin Do-il was bleeding profusely from a cut dealt by Bowl Cut. Facing a razor-sharp blade, he was all but powerless, barehanded. But this time, he actually saw through his opponent's attack path, and for the first time, narrowly dodged a strike by throwing his head back. Because of this move, he realized that Bowl Cut's weapon simply widened the attack area. If he could precisely evade that zone, there was a chance to strike back. Sure enough, using this technique, Jin Do-il landed a solid hit to Bowl Cut's chin. However, facing a weapon as well, Lee Gil-soo was utterly overpowered by the Japanese man's propeller-like crutches, forced into a narrow gap between cars. Lee Gil-soo knew that as long as the Japanese man held those weapons, he stood no chance of winning. The only way out was to deal with the crutches first. At that moment, he happened to notice that one of his shoelaces had come loose. Just as the Japanese man closed in, Lee Gil-soo swiftly tied his shoes together with the lace. The Japanese man charged with his crutches, but Lee Gil-soo used the shoelace to bind both the man's hands and the crutches together in one quick motion. Disarmed, the Japanese man could only take a brutal beating from Lee Gil-soo. At the same time, Park Yong-go was no match for Gong Jin-sok. Because Park's deadliest moves, his steel legs and kicks, had all been taught to him personally by Gong Jin-sok. When Park had nowhere to go, it was Gong Jin-sok who took him in, and coached him in fighting one-on-one. Seeing Park's extraordinary talent, Gong Jin-sok even gave him a pair of iron shin guards, telling him, "In this world, it's not the strong who rule, but the ones who win." Park Yong-go had always believed in Gong Jin-sok's philosophy, willing to do anything for Thunderstorm, until that incident made him realize, Thunderstorm was not salvation, but a shackle. Even so, Gong Jin-sok still wanted to pin the label of ingrate on him now, even raising his fist to kill him. At the critical moment, Lee Gil-soo rushed in and blocked the fatal blow with a crutch. Gong Jin-sok recognized the weapon as his own subordinates and sensed trouble. Looking back, he saw his three most trusted men all knocked down by three young nobodies. But Gong Jin-sok quickly sneered, "I don't know why you're going so far for Park Yong-go, but you'd better be careful. He's not worth your help. After all, this guy can betray anyone at any moment." Hearing this, Park Yong-go could only give a bitter smile and explain, years ago, he'd learned from Gong Jin-sok himself that the director of the orphanage where he'd grown up, in order to repay high-interest debts to Thunderstorm, had forced the orphanage children to transport contraband. In order to protect his younger siblings, he had no choice but to drive the director away by force. This also meant that Thunderstorm was unable to recover the loan, and as the one responsible for debt collection, he didn't defend himself, shouldering all the blame alone. But to his surprise, Gong Jin-seop only laughed when he finished speaking. Kong had already known the truth. He understood that Park Yong-go chose to protect a group of helpless orphans rather than side with Thunderstorm. After he finished speaking, Gong Jin-seop's expression turned fierce. He assumed a fighting stance. "This grudge, today, it must be settled." Lee Gil-soo immediately stepped forward and threatened, "It's not too late to back down now. There are 4 of us against you. You won't come out on top." Gong Jin-seop merely sneered, and in the next instant, a swarm of underlings closed in from all sides. At his command, everyone rushed forward, swinging iron bars. Faced with the sudden encirclement, Lee Gil-soo and his 3 companions were thrown into panic. But Jin Do-il quickly regained his composure. "They may have the numbers, but as long as we stick together, we can break through." Watching Lee Gil-soo and the others prepare to fight to the death, Park Yong-go was filled with confusion, unable to understand why they would go to such lengths for him. Just as his attention wavered for a moment, Gong Jin-seop's fist suddenly came flying, knocking him to the ground in a single blow. At the same time, Lee Gil-soo and the other 2 were caught in the midst of a fierce brawl, while Park Yong-go and Gong Jin-seop grappled together. But Gong Jin-seop was wearing a bulletproof vest and wielding a straight tiger baton, rendering Park Yong-go's attacks completely ineffective. Instead, his resistance only left him battered by the weapon. As Gong Jin-seop clenched his fist again, gathering his strength, Park Yong-go planned to block with his leg, hoping to find an opening to counterattack. But unexpectedly, the guard plate on his leg shattered instantly. With his only protection gone, Park Yong-go deflated like a punctured ball. He was sent flying several meters by a single punch from Gong Jin-seop. Looking down at Park Yong-go lying motionless on the ground, Gong Jin-seop sneered and mocked, "Now you understand, don't you? Without everything I gave you, you're nothing. You can't do a thing." Hearing this, Park Yong-go lay on the ground, dejected, his will to resist gradually fading away. But at that moment, he suddenly looked up, and saw Lee Gil-soo and the others, still fighting back unyieldingly despite being surrounded. How could he give up just like that? So, he decisively threw away the leg braces that Gong Jin Seop had given him, and chose to fight to the end, relying solely on his own true strength. In Gong Jin Seop's eyes, this was nothing short of courting death. He immediately lunged forward, ready to finish Park Yongo off, but to his shock, Park dodged with ease. Park Yongo was surprised himself. Without the leg braces, his steps were lighter than ever before. Not only was he able to evade every attack, but he landed a kick squarely in Gong Jin Seop's weak spot. As it turned out, after shedding the leg braces, this was his real speed. Leaping into the air, he unleashed one final kick, at last bringing his long-standing feud with Gong Jin Seop to an end. In this moment, Park Yongo was fully awakened. The things he thought he needed to protect himself were nothing more than shackles holding him back. Just as he finally breathed a sigh of relief, Gong Jin Seop, unwilling to admit defeat, struggled to his feet once more, fists swinging, refusing to lose, unwilling to be beaten by someone he called worse than trash like Park Yongo. But now, Park Yongo's strength had far surpassed his. With a single move, he brought Gong Jin Seop down for good. Looking at the utterly defeated Gong Jin Seop, Park Yongo spoke words that would stay with him forever. It's not the strong who prevail, only the victor grows stronger. That's what you taught me. The henchmen, seeing their boss defeated, were instantly thrown into confusion. In the next second, they noticed Lee Gil-soo and the other two still glaring at them like tigers eyeing their prey, and immediately abandoned their boss and scattered in panic. The crisis was finally over, and Park Yongo collapsed to the ground, completely exhausted. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, a hand reached out to him. Lee Gil-soo smiled and said, "If you've won, hurry up and get up. You threw away your ankle weights, you fought so much better than before." Park Yongo stared in surprise at the scene before him, realizing it overlapped perfectly with the day he'd been defeated by Lee Gil-soo. The only difference was, back then, he hadn't managed to grab Lee Gil-soo's hand. This time, he wouldn't miss his chance. But in the next instant, a familiar voice cried out, "Jang Hae-seon," tears streaming down her face, came running toward him. Before Park Yongo could react, Hae-seon threw herself into his arms, hugging him tight. "Do you have any idea how worried I was about you?" Park Yongo gently patted Jang Hae-seon, comforting her by saying it was all over. "I won't ever let you be sad again." The next day, back at school, Lee Gil-soo suddenly realized his wallet was missing, along with his bank card and student ID. At that moment, to his surprise, he saw Park Yongo, who had been on leave from school, returning to the classroom. In fact, Park Yongo hadn't planned to come back to school, but last night, Hae-seon had begged him through tears, hoping he could return to how he once was. She'd even made a pinky promise with him. Since he'd agreed, he had to keep his word. Park Yongo had barely warmed his seat when Kang In-hae showed up with a pack of people. "I heard you took down Thunderstorm, so I'm considering whether to let you back in. After all, the gang-on-gang standby team is your only way out." To everyone's surprise, Park Yongo refused flatly. "Now I'll find my own path." He used to think that joining the gang-on-gang standby team, with at least a half-basement dorm room, was the best he could hope for as someone without a family. All his life, he'd been alone, and finding a place to belong was his only goal. But in chasing that goal, he'd lost his way, left with nothing but violence and betrayal. After all the twists and turns, he finally realized, the home he'd been searching for had always been right by his side. Watching Hae-seon joke around with the younger kids, Park Yongo spread his arms wide in happiness, and pulled his most important family into a hug. What surprised him was that Lee Gil-soo, Jin Do-il, and Eyebrow Bro had all shown up too, as special guests invited by Hae-seon. During the lively dinner, Lee Gil-soo couldn't help but ask Park Yongo, "Did you sort out the issue with your motorcycle?" Park Yongo replied, "I'll pay for the damage once I find the owner. I still don't know who it is, but I heard he's a pretty famous student around here." Lee Gil-soo was puzzled. "Is he the one who crossed Thunderstorm?" Park Yongo explained, "It's got nothing to do with Thunderstorm. Thunderstorm couldn't handle it and got retaliated against. It turned out that big gangs like the gang-on-gang often hired Thunderstorm to do shady jobs for them. The motorcycle arson was one of those jobs. And Thunderstorm had been punished by the people who hired him. Rumor had it the group was called the Begzan Group, a crew of seriously tough customers." After hearing all this, Lee Gil-soo felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't expected to get tangled up with the Begzan Group again. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, a crowd had gathered around a motorcycle drenched in gasoline. Jinsang High School's boss, Huang Hyuk-jin, was so angry that he was practically jumping up and down. "How dare someone try to burn my precious motorcycle? If I catch them, they're finished." No sooner had he spoken than one of his underlings suddenly shouted, having found a wallet on the ground. The next day, Lee Gil-soo, worried that Baishan might cause trouble, made a point of asking about Jangmi's situation. Unexpectedly, he was invited out by the goddess herself. The moment he saw Jangmi, whom he hadn't met in ages, all his worries vanished in an instant. Because it was his very first date with a girl. He'd spent the night before researching every dating tip he could find online. So today, he started by taking Jangmi to a beautifully decorated Italian restaurant. After the meal, the two of them went to a dreamy little cafe, where he ordered cakes and sweet drinks. But when it came time to pay, he accidentally spilled a handful of coins all over the floor. It turned out he'd lost his wallet a few days ago and had no choice but to pay with loose change. Seeing this, Jangmi offered to treat him this time, easing the awkwardness. In truth, Jangmi had asked Lee Gil-soo out simply to thank him for his help last time. Once he realized the truth, Lee Gil-soo felt a pang of disappointment. So it was true, Jangmi didn't feel that way about him. No wonder he'd felt her mood was off all along. Not wanting Jangmi to feel pressured, Lee Gil-soo suddenly stood up and apologized earnestly. Actually, this is my first time hanging out with a female friend one-on-one, so I planned all these dating activities. Maybe I didn't plan it well. I'm sorry. Jangmi was genuinely surprised when she heard this. You misunderstood. I don't even like Italian food. This is my first time in such a pink, girly cafe too, that's why I was so uncomfortable. He smiled and asked, so, should we go do something else? Before Lee Gil-soo could react, Jangmi grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the amusement park's giant Ferris wheel. It was the first time Lee Gil-soo had ever seen Jangmi smile so happily. Even though he got so dizzy he was about to throw up, he stubbornly stuck it out. Before he could recover, she dragged him off to the pirate ship, the roller coaster, the drop tower. Not a single thrilling ride was skipped. After one round, Lee Gil-soo's legs were like jelly, he collapsed onto the ground, completely spent. As dusk fell, the two headed home together. Jangmi thanked Lee Gil-soo for keeping her company, saying they could hang out again anytime. Lee Gil-soo blushed at this, but mustered up his courage to ask her out for next time. But just as he was about to speak, a blinding light swept over them. The owner of the motorcycle had tracked them down, wallet in hand, and without a word, came straight at Lee Gil-soo. Lee Gil-soo tried to explain, but the furious Hwang Hyuk-jin wouldn't listen, charging at him and insisting he was the one who had doused his bike in gasoline. Seeing this, Jangmi rushed forward to stop him, only to be blocked by two of Hwang Hyuk-jin's men. Watching as one of them told her to get lost, Jangmi lashed out with a sudden kick, landing it squarely on the man's head. She had thought this move would make his opponent back down, but to her surprise, the man was completely unscathed and even caught the attack directly. At that moment, Lee Gil-soo saw Jangmi in danger. He dashed forward in an instant. But Hwang Hyuk-jin grabbed him, and slammed him hard onto the ground. Looking at Hwang Hyuk-jin's crazed expression, Lee Gil-soo realized that there was no way to reason with him, only by defeating him could he escape. With both old and new grudges fueling him, Hwang Hyuk-jin launched a fierce barrage of attacks at Lee Gil-soo. At last, he seized the chance and prepared to unleash his signature chokehold. But to his surprise, Lee Gil-soo anticipated it perfectly and broke free in a flash. It turned out that ever since their fight at the abandoned construction site, Lee Gil-soo had noticed others in the arena using Hwang Hyuk-jin's techniques, so he'd already come up with ways to counter them. Still, he had underestimated Hwang Hyuk-jin's true strength. In the next moment, his right leg was seized in a vice-like grip. And he was hoisted onto a shoulder, then thrown viciously through the air. Worse yet, he landed straight into the river channel. Struggling to his feet, Lee Gil-soo saw Hwang Hyuk-jin rushing at him again, pressing his head down, intent on making him taste the agony of drowning. Hwang Hyuk-jin would never allow anyone to lord over him. As a child, he'd been smaller than his peers, which made him a favorite target for bullies. Do you think he's cute? That was the excuse for endless torment. In a school where strength was everything, he'd been at the very bottom, beaten countless times, until he finally understood, to fight monsters, you had to become one. So, he began to study fighting techniques best suited for someone of his size. At last, when he gained real strength, he became someone everyone feared. And just as he was brimming with confidence, ready to finish off Lee Gil-soo with one punch, Lee Gil-soo suddenly spat water into his eyes, leaving them stinging. Lee Gil-soo seized the chance to break free, climbed out of the water, and once again explained that he really hadn't tampered with the motorcycle. But to Hwang Hyuk-jin, it sounded like nothing but excuses, igniting his rage even further. Lee Gil-soo's heart tightened. If he got caught again, it might be over for him. But in the next second, inspiration struck. Facing Hwang Hyuk-jin, who had suddenly pinned him against the wall, Lee Gil-soo actually taunted him, "Cutie, you're still the same as ever, not a bit changed." Those words, "cutie," cut deep into Hwang Hyuk-jin. He suddenly unleashed all his strength, choking Lee Gil-soo with a deadly grip. Lee Gil-soo screamed in pain, but just then, He mustered the last of his strength, grabbed Huang Hyuk-jin's arm, and shouted with all his might, "Attack him now!" Hearing the signal, Jangmi sprang out and, mustering all his strength, kicked the unsuspecting Huang Hyuk-jin away. Lee Gil-soo was stunned. He hadn't expected Jangmi to be so formidable. But just as the two thought it was over and were preparing to go home, Huang Hyuk-jin climbed out of the water and called after them, "You cuties. Was that supposed to tickle me just now?" He finished speaking, completely ignoring their terrified faces, and charged at them, locking Lee Gil-soo in a chokehold, and slamming him hard against the wall. Lee Gil-soo had thought he'd made a lot of progress, but his straight punch still did nothing to this monster. Seeing this, Jangmi rushed over to help, only to be sent flying by a fierce kick from Huang Hyuk-jin. Immediately after, Huang Hyuk-jin grabbed Lee Gil-soo with one hand and hoisted him onto his shoulder, ready to finally deal with this guy who had angered him so many times. But just at that moment, a motorcycle suddenly appeared. Huang Hyuk-jin recognized it at a glance. It was his beloved motorcycle. Before he could see who dared to be so bold, the motorcycle sped past, crashing into him and Lee Gil-soo and scattering them apart. Huang Hyuk-jin ignored Lee Gil-soo and roared at the rider to get off his motorcycle at once. But the rider shot back, "If you want to pick a fight, at least figure out who your target is. Don't go around hitting innocent people." At this point, Lee Gil-soo finally saw clearly, the person on the motorcycle was actually Park Yong-go. The reason he showed up here was that, an hour ago, he'd happened to spot a thug who'd crossed him heading off to catch Lee Gil-soo at the arcade. He played a little trick and let the thugs bring him straight here. The man in black protested aggrievedly, "Boss, that guy said there might be a huge misunderstanding between you two." Huang Hyuk-jin looked puzzled. Could there really be someone else involved? Park Yong-go pointed at himself and said, "I'm the culprit. Actually, Gil-soo was helping you protect your motorcycle." With that, he took out the evidence, a chat log showing the arson order given by Thunderstorm's boss, Gong Jin-seop. Strictly speaking, though, it was actually the Baeksan group pulling strings behind the scenes. When Huang Hyuk-jin heard the truth, he was in disbelief. He grabbed Park Yong-go by the collar and demanded a full explanation. After Park Yong-go explained everything in detail, Huang Hyuk-jin was furious. He never expected those lunatics from the Baeksan group to go so far. Park Yong-go asked in confusion, "Who are these people anyway? Just to mess with you, they'd even go to such lengths?" Huang Hyuk-jin's expression suddenly turned desolate. The Baeksan group wanted to unify all the high schools in the area, so they'd schemed to get close to him. Not long ago, they'd invited him to a club, slapped a stack of cash on the table, and tried to buy his allegiance, demanding he hand over Jinsang High School. They even threatened that refusing would bring serious trouble. But he'd refused without a moment's hesitation. Since then, the Baeksan group had started using violence against Jinsang, leaving the school in chaos. He'd resolved that he would rather die than join those guys, but holding on to the school was getting harder and harder. Besides Yukmun, Guan and Jinsang, all the other schools had already been taken over by them. Their power had become overwhelming. Especially the elite group, 5 Dragons, formed by Baeksan group's top fighters. Meanwhile, 4 of the Baeksan group's 5 Dragons were gathered at headquarters. Guan Tyran, ranked 5th among the Baeksan group's 5 Dragons, was in a foul mood because Thunderstorm had botched the job. At this moment, the 4th, Choi No-myun, suggested they just go and destroy Jinsang outright. Maria, the 3rd, immediately perked up at the idea and said there was no need for everyone to get involved. She wanted to have some fun with Huang Hyuk-jin, that cutie, herself. Unexpectedly, the 2nd, Tenchai, promptly interrupted everyone's impulse, stressing that they had to wait for orders from above. The boss had made it clear, no one was to act without permission. Just as Tenchai finished speaking, a figure suddenly pushed open the door. The Baeksan group's 5 Dragons, "It's a pleasure to see you all." Sun Sakyu followed him inside, glancing around at the opulent surroundings. "This place is as lavish as ever. Looks like business has been good for you guys." Tenchai forced a polite smile. "Oh, not at all. We're just barely scraping by." Secretly, however, he slipped a pill into the wine glass, then handed it to Sun Sakyu, telling him to have a sip to soothe his throat after the long journey. Sun Sakyu more or less guessed there was something special in the drink, and eagerly opened his mouth, wanting to drain it in one go. But just at that moment, Kang In-hae reached out and stopped his senior. "We're not here to mess around. You need to restrain yourself." Sun Sakyu had no choice but to set the glass down with trembling hands. The drugs had already made him somewhat addicted. Seeing this, Tenchai gave a cold smirk. "Looks like someone's gotten quite dependent. In that case, let's get down to business." Everyone sat around and began discussing. During the talks, Kang In-hae kept pressing about stronger drugs. "If we want to defeat Jang Chong, we need something with a more potent effect." This completely infuriated Tenchai, who slammed his fist down and shattered the table. You think our Baeksan group is just a bunch of drug dealers? Watch your mouth. If it weren't for the fact that our boss has some ties with your dad, you'd have been dealt with long ago. If you really want to overthrow Yukmun Guan, you'll have to agree to a few of my conditions first. Only then can we continue cooperating. The scene shifts to the next day. Knowing his abilities were lacking, Lee Gil-soo trained desperately hard, preparing for a future showdown with the Baeksan group. But sheer hard work could only do so much for his physical strength. So he went straight to Jin Do-il and Eyebrow Bro, asking if they knew any way to get stronger. Jin Do-il thought for a moment, and immediately someone came to mind. A top member of the school's discipline squad, Yukmun Guan's most formidable grappler, Senior No Seongyu. Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo excitedly pressed for the senior's whereabouts, then dashed off at once. Jin Do-il and Eyebrow Bro both jumped in fright, because that place was usually off limits to other students. Blissfully unaware, Lee Gil-soo had barely opened the door to the breeding farm when the senior pinned him to the ground with one hand, tossed him out like a chick, and warned him to stay away from the farm. After learning the reason, Lee Gil-soo bowed and apologized repeatedly, but the senior only left behind an angry, departing figure. He began to wonder what kind of person this senior really was. Determined to learn grappling, he resolved to follow the senior every day, trying to figure out his preferences. When No Seongyu was 18, his mother sent him the illegitimate child she had given birth to in secret. At first, he wanted to send his little brother to an orphanage and wash his hands of him. But when he saw the innocent look in his brother's eyes, he couldn't help but recall his own lonely childhood. Kind-hearted as he was, he finally decided to shelter this brother he'd never met before. With help from senior Jang Chong, he managed to secure the school's breeding farm and secretly moved in. Though life became even harder, he never once regretted it. In his bleak life, his younger brother, Guan, became the only reason he kept going. Yet just when he thought things could go on like this, debt collectors for his mother's loan suddenly showed up, demanding that No Seongyu personally grill meat for them. They even grinned maliciously, saying no matter where No Seongyu hid, they would always find him. Suppressing his anger, No Seongyu wondered why they kept pestering him when he'd always paid the interest on time for his mother. Unexpectedly, they told him someone had bought the debt from them, and had specifically asked about the person No Seongyu cared about most. As a thank you to the buyer, they revealed everything about No Seongyu taking care of his younger brother. When he heard the news, No Seongyu felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. He lost control in an instant, grabbing the other by the collar and roaring in fury. "Didn't I tell you not to lay a finger on Guan?" But the man only laughed carelessly and said, "Instead of getting worked up here, shouldn't you hurry home and check on your brother?" Blazing with rage, No Seongyu flung the man aside, his face murderous as he warned them to pray that Guan was unharmed, otherwise, they'd pay the price. With that, he sprinted out the door, tearing down the road toward the small house he shared with Guan. Lee Gil-soo, who had been secretly following his senior, was startled by what he saw. Though he had no idea what was going on, he decided to quietly trail after him. No Seongyu finally reached the little house. He pushed open the door, only to find the room empty. There was no sign of Guan. He stared in disbelief at the vacant room. Even the loan sharks didn't know about this place. What he didn't know was that his brother had left on his own. To fold a little paper rooster as a birthday gift for his brother, Guan had sneaked out to buy some colored cardstock. But just as he was about to head home, someone called out to him, "Hey, kid, we're your brother's friends. Wanna come play with us?" Night fell deeper. No Seongyu scoured nearly the entire city. At the edge of despair, he thought he heard his brother calling out to him. He turned, and there, at last, was the Guan he'd been searching for. In that moment, seeing his brother again, No Seongyu could no longer hold back his emotions. He rushed over and wrapped Guan in a tight embrace. Listening to his brother's explanation, No Seongyu gently stroked Guan's hair. Having Guan was enough. "Don't make me worry anymore." Hearing this, Guan broke into a happy smile. "Don't worry, brother. Your friends brought me here safely." No sooner had he finished speaking than the three thugs from before suddenly appeared. Baeksan Group's officer, Kim Do-yuk, grinned and said, "Nice to finally meet you. So you're No Seongyu. From now on, when you pay your debt, just hand the money over to Baeksan Group. To put it simply, we're your new masters now." At this, No Seongyu understood, these were the people who had bought up his debt. But to keep his brother out of danger, he pretended not to believe them, trying to evade them for now. He hadn't expected Kim Do-yuk to suddenly seize Guan's hand, snatching away the little paper rooster before anyone could react. Ignoring Guan's choked pleas, he crushed the gift prepared for No Seongyu right in front of them. As if lecturing, he told Guan that in a world as complicated as this, letting someone poor and powerless be your guardian could only end in heartbreak. Watching his brother's devastated expression, No Seongyu's anger exploded. At that moment, Lee Gil-soo, who'd been trailing him all along, suddenly charged forward and kicked Kim Do-yuk aside. Lee Gil-soo turned to No Sung-yu and said, "Senior, this isn't a chicken farm, is it? I can step in, right?" Unexpectedly, No Sung-yu stopped him at once, because any threat to his brother, he would handle himself. He entrusted Guan to Lee Gil-soo's care, then calmly caught the punch flying at him and, with a slight twist, easily broke the attacker's wrist. They had only survived this long because of Guan. But just then, another red-haired man tried to launch a sneak attack. After a barrage of kicks like a raging storm, the red-haired man, who had competed internationally in Taekwondo, knocked No Sung-yu to the ground with an arrogant swagger. But he never imagined this was exactly the trap No Sung-yu had set up. No Sung-yu pretended to fall, then twisted around and locked the red-haired man's leg in a hold, pinning him to the ground so he couldn't move, forced to watch helplessly as his own leg was about to be broken. Seeing his lackeys all beaten down, Kim Do-yuk had no choice but to step in himself. He charged like a wild boar, slamming hard into No Sung-yu's stomach. Lee Gil-soo, worried at the sight, wanted to rush in to help. Unexpectedly, No Sung-yu used Kim Do-yuk's back for support, vaulted himself into the air, then slid down in an instant, locking his legs tightly around Kim Do-yuk's neck. With just a bit of force, Kim Do-yuk couldn't breathe, trapped in place and unable to move. In the end, the three defeated guys called their boss to report in. Learning of their failure, Guan Tyran impatiently ordered them to get back to the Coliseum and wait for their punishment. No matter how Kim Do-yuk pleaded, Guan Tyran simply hung up on him. In truth, Guan Tyran knew well that Kim Do-yuk was no match for No Sung-yu. But with the deadline up for Han Jae-hoo's participation in the Coliseum, the unlucky Kim Do-yuk had to fill in. Meanwhile, because of this crisis, the misunderstanding between Lee Gil-soo and senior No Sung-yu was finally resolved. To thank Lee Gil-soo for his help earlier, No Sung-yu took the initiative to offer him a favor in return. Lee Gil-soo, a little embarrassed, scratched his cheek, but gathered his courage and loudly made his request. He wanted to learn martial arts from his senior, especially the ground techniques he'd witnessed the night before. This request surprised No Sung-yu a little, but he didn't refuse. Early the next morning, No Sung-yu was already waiting at the training ground. Seeing Lee Gil-soo and the others arrive, full of energy, he couldn't help but smile. The people from Yukmun Guan really haven't changed at all. But he quickly straightened his face, asking with a hint of suspicion, "Why is someone missing? Weren't you all supposed to come as a team?" Just as he finished speaking, Park Yongo appeared, looking extremely reluctant. Lee Gil-soo and the others were speechless at the sight. Since he was the one who'd insisted on coming, yet now he looked so unwilling. Sensing things were getting rowdy, No Sung-yu cut them off and got straight to the point. After a thorough explanation of various fighting techniques, he told everyone, "If you want to learn ground techniques, you can actually just find videos online and practice along." Saying that, he bent down to pick up a large stone from the ground, and under everyone's stunned gaze, crushed the stone into pieces with his bare hands. This was the real lesson for today: grip strength, the most powerful weapon in ground grappling. Then, he pulled out climbing ropes, and had the four pair up, telling them to start climbing the cliff right in front of them. All four were startled. But to become stronger, Lee Gil-soo and Park Yongo still led the charge and went for it. They endured all sorts of grueling training. And even with their palms battered and blistered, the four gritted their teeth and pressed on, day after day, making it through the toughest phase. After completing the first stage of training, No Sung-yu asked Lee Gil-soo, a bit puzzled, why he was so desperate to become stronger. He had never seen such a determined newcomer as Lee Gil-soo before. Lee Gil-soo confessed that he really liked Yukmun Guan. Here, for the first time, he made friends who could enjoy training with him, and for the first time, he looked forward to going to school. But he never expected that Yukmun Guan would be threatened by outsiders. In order to protect the things he cherished, he wanted to become stronger. After hearing this, No Sung-yu finally understood, "I get why Senior Jang Chong would train you. You remind me of a guy Jang Chong deeply cares about." Meanwhile, Jang Chong arrived at someone's home. He greeted the owner politely, then walked up the stairs with practiced ease. Seeing a stack of bowls and chopsticks piled outside the door, Jang Chong couldn't help but place his hand on the door, and softly asked, "Are you alright? It's been a long time since I've come by. A lot of interesting things have happened at school lately. There's one story I have to tell you." The boy inside moved a little. Jang Chong went on, "Do you remember that first-year transfer student I told you about last time? He's grown from a rookie who got beaten up into a fighter who can now hold his own in the arena. Jang Jae, the arena we built together seems to be getting better and better, don't you think?" The boy in the room still didn't respond. But as he listened to Jang Chong's story, his mood was unsettled for the first time. When he returned to the gym to train, Hyo Gun-hang immediately noticed his low spirits, and guessed he must have gone to see Jang Jae. Upon learning that Jang Jae was still indifferent to everything, Hyo Gun-hang comforted him, saying they should just wait a little longer. If Jang Jae was ready, he'd speak up for sure. Then Hyo Gunhang added that he'd finished looking into the matter Jang Chong had entrusted to him. As expected, Baeksan Group was no ordinary organization. Though newly established, they'd already persecuted quite a few schools, and those associated with them were either drug addicts or violent lunatics with criminal records. Most troublesome of all, Baeksan Group kept threatening to swallow up the entire Gyeongnam city. Upon hearing this, Jang Chung angrily slammed his fist into a sandbag. He thought, after all these years, it seemed time to reorganize his network of connections. A week later, a yellow-haired Baeksan Group punk brought a beautiful woman into a nightclub. Soon, a man calling himself Dave appeared, introducing himself in a mixture of Chinese and English. On the surface, he was the club manager, but in truth he was also the head of the Coliseum. When he learned the woman was there to apply for a job as DJ, Dave took her to the basement level, introducing it as the club's exclusive fighting arena. Just as he was about to stay and watch the upcoming match with her, his phone suddenly rang. He had no choice but to give a few instructions to his underlings before leaving in a hurry. Opening the door to a private room, he finally met the long-awaited No Seung-yu. Dave didn't press No Seung-yu about injuring Baeksan Group members. Instead, he cut straight to the chase, inviting No Seung-yu to join them. With that, he picked up the remote, and as the curtain slowly opened, a bustling arena was revealed below. In the ring, it was Kim Do-yuk facing off against the group of 5 money slaves who, having failed their mission, now had to repay their debt with their bodies. Dave introduced the place with pride. This was actually an underground fight gambling den. Unlike ordinary tournaments, here, all sorts of dirty tricks were allowed. It was precisely this kind of bloody chaos that drew countless gamblers to the scene. Dave shot a sly glance at No Seung-yu and said, "With Yukmun Guan's reputation and your skill, your value is bound to soar." He pointed to the electronic screen across from them, displaying the amount of bets placed by the audience. The prize money was substantial. Working with them wouldn't just clear his debts, it could make him a fortune. No Seung-yu looked at the outstretched hand in front of him and, after a moment's thought, said he needed time to consider. After all, someone needed looking after. If he got hurt, things could get complicated. Hearing this, Dave's expression darkened, but not wanting to put No Seung-yu off, he handed over his business card generously, asking for an answer within the week. If there were any questions, No Seung-yu should come to him. After all, the fact that they could still have such a calm conversation was already a sign of his leniency. The scene shifted back to the Yukmun Guan farm. No Seung-yu was deep in thought as he helped his younger brother feed the chickens. Though the Baeksan Group's arena was wild and ruthless, if he could hold out there for a while, he could shake off the debt collectors, and give one a better environment to grow up in. At that moment, Lee Gil-soo unexpectedly showed up. No Seung-yu immediately asked him to watch his brother for a day, explaining that he had something to do that evening. Lee Gil-soo, puzzled but agreeable, accepted. Little did he know looking after a kid was far tougher than he imagined. After just a short while, he was already exhausted. At that moment, he chanced upon a business card. On it were the words Baeksan Group Club. Sensing something was wrong, Lee Gil-soo grabbed Jin Do-il and Eyebrow Bro and rushed to the address on the card, finding a place with a long line out front. As they tried to figure out what kind of place it was, Park Yongo suddenly spoke up, saying it was a nightclub. Both minors and adults could get in, but it was hard to enter. It was a private club that required a secret code for admission. As he was explaining, a stir rippled through the crowd. They saw Han Jae-hoo, covered in bruises, trying to get into the club, only to be thrown out. Lee Gil-soo, seeing this, led Park Yongo and the others to corner Han Jae-hoo in an alley as he left alone. After some questioning, Han Jae-hoo named his conditions. If they could bring out the thing he wanted from the club, he'd tell them everything he knew. Once Lee Gil-soo agreed, Han Jae-hoo started talking. It turned out that the club, which looked like a church, was actually a fighting casino. They made money by having high school students fight, and his battered appearance was thanks to the arena. But the fighters weren't there by choice. Most owed the Baeksan Group money or had been blackmailed into competing. Han Jae-hoo gave them a wicked grin and warned, the person they were looking for might be tied to the Baeksan Group, but once you get in, it's hard to get out. Those guys drug the drinks. Once you take one, you're hooked, becoming their slave, sinking ever deeper, never able to break free. Having learned the truth, the 4 of them made their way to the club entrance. Han Jae-hoo told the bouncer the secret code from behind, and they gained entry without trouble. But just then, Lee Gil-soo and Eyebrow Bro were stopped. The reason? People without taste aren't allowed in. Jin Do-il and Park Yongo, relishing the moment, strode into the club, leaving Lee Gil-soo and Eyebrow Bro to wail outside. Once inside, the two decided to split up to investigate more thoroughly. As a regular at places like this, Park Yongo quickly started chatting up women and digging for information. Are there even more interesting spots inside the nightclub? The beauty immediately caught on, giving Park Yango an ambiguous smile as she took his hand, ready to lead him to that secret place. Meanwhile, outside, Lee Gil-soo and Eyebrow Bro were still racking their brains about how to make themselves look more tasteful. Just as Eyebrow Bro was wondering where to find the right clothes, he turned his head and happened to spot Han Jae-hoo not far away. The two exchanged a knowing smile, then quietly approached and began to borrow some things off Han Jae-hoo. At last, Lee Gil-soo and Eyebrow Bro managed to pull off that man of the world vibe, brimming with confidence as they returned to the nightclub entrance. This time, they were indeed let in without a hitch. But unexpectedly, Eyebrow Bro was stopped at the door again, forced to watch as Lee Gil-soo swaggered in, grinning with satisfaction. Eyebrow Bro completely lost it, feeling like he'd become the most lowly one out of the four. Meanwhile, Park Yango had already followed the beauty down to the underground level. When she considerately pushed open that door, he found himself face to face with the underground arena Han Jae-hoo had mentioned. Before he could recover from his shock, Jin Do-il was already there, arms around two women, teasing Park Yango for arriving so late. Jin Do-il feigned innocence, explaining that after he and Park Yango got separated, he'd just been standing around when two beauties came up and brought him here. Park Yango was instantly fuming. How could Jin Do-il be so popular? But just then, a new round of matches began in the arena. This bout was between the red team, a fearsome five-man slasher gang undefeated so far, and the blue team's ace from the Yukmun Guan, No Seungyu. Before the match, Guan Tyran forced him to take a highly addictive stimulant. When No Seungyu refused, Guan Tyran merely sneered and said, "All the fighters out there are high, you think you can last long without it?" Just to be sure, he shoved the drugs into No Seungyu's hand, telling him to take them when he couldn't hold out any longer, since it would change the course of the fight. In the end, No Seungyu was sent into the cage barehanded. His opponents were five fully armed, drug-fueled fighters with a flawless record. As soon as the octagon doors closed, the energy in the arena exploded. Classmates who rushed to stop the fight were stunned by the scene, unable to understand why senior No Seungyu would take such a risk. But for No Seungyu, the point of no return had been reached. There was no turning back. Even if a brutal battle awaited, he could only grit his teeth and see it through. At that moment, one of the five picked up a weapon and launched the first attack. But No Seungyu managed to dodge the blow entirely, seizing the chance to duck low, wrap his arms around the man's thighs, and, with sheer force, hoist the 200-pound brute onto his shoulders, choking him hard and slamming him to the ground. But before No Seungyu could finish off this opponent, another fighter came at him with a spiked club. Sensing the danger, No Seungyu leaned back to evade the strike. He dodged the attack while twisting around to lock his opponent in a hold. In the next instant, he lifted his rival clean off the ground and, with a sudden backflip, came crashing down hard onto the thug who was still struggling desperately on the floor. Watching senior No Seungyu take down two men at once with a single move, Jin Do-il and Park Yango finally let out a sigh of relief, their worries easing all at once. But just then, the man beside them warned not to celebrate too soon. The strength of the slash gang didn't come from their weapons alone. Just as he said, during the previous exchange, the gang leader had noticed that No Seungyu excelled at ground techniques. So he immediately flung out his chain, and had two henchmen attack from both sides, mercilessly charging at No Seungyu. In order to dodge their attacks, No Seungyu was unknowingly backed into a corner, completely unaware that a chain was snaking up behind him. In that instant, the two henchmen each grabbed an end of the chain, and suddenly trapped No Seungyu in an iron grip. Seeing this, Park Yango was struck speechless with shock, but the man beside him seemed unfazed. The real strength of the slash gang wasn't in their weapons, but in their sharp eyes that could precisely analyze every move of an opponent. At this moment, No Seungyu became a sitting duck, his skin torn open by the masked man's claws. But just as the opponent lunged in for a killing blow, No Seungyu flashed a mysterious, meaningful smile. Ignoring the searing pain of the chain, he suddenly lunged forward, seizing the moment to clamp his still mobile legs tightly around his foe, and before the opponent could react, he slammed his head forward in a vicious headbutt, shattering the mask on impact, blood spraying everywhere. The two henchmen recoiled in fright and instantly let go of the chain. With the chains loosened, No Seungyu spun around and grabbed the two by the head, taking them down in an instant with effortless ease. Yet just as No Seungyu thought the fight was finally over, the announcer abruptly declared the start of round 2, with the new opponent being former Baek Sanho officer Kim Do-yuk and his squad. Seeing this, Jin Do-il was immediately uneasy, muttering that they wouldn't even give them time to bandage their wounds, so inhumane. No sooner had he spoken than Park Yango clapped him on the shoulder, saying they couldn't just watch those maniacs gang up on No Seungyu. We have to get up there and stop this match. But as soon as the two of them climbed into the ring, the announcer immediately chased them back down, while the audience jeered, telling them to get lost and stop blocking their bets. Park Yong-go's temper flared and he shouted back, daring anyone to come up for a fight. As the tension mounted, a voice suddenly rang out from all around. Guan Tyran stood at the microphone, reassuring everyone that this was a special segment. From this moment on, bets were open for Yukmun Guan versus Kim Do-yuk's team in a 3-on-3 battle. No sooner had he spoken than the audience whipped out their phones to place their wagers. Park Yong-go and Jin Do-il could only remain in the ring, standing shoulder to shoulder with their senior. But before the match could even officially begin, Kim Do-yuk took turns mocking all three of them, his face brimming with confidence as he declared he'd come fully prepared this time and was sure to win. No Sung-yu told him to shut up and hurry up with the fight. He had to get home to take care of his little brother, and time was tight. But in the next second, Park Yong-go broke the news that Lee Gil-soo had also shown up here. The moment he heard, anxiety surged through No Sung-yu. Immediately after, Kim Do-yuk's squad suddenly launched their attack. Distracted by worry for his brother, No Sung-yu was caught off guard by Kim Do-yuk, who slammed him heavily to the ground. He hadn't expected that the fat man would actually know some grappling techniques. Still, these little tricks were nothing to him. He was confident he could handle anything. Eager to return to his brother's side as soon as possible, No Sung-yu launched a fierce counterattack, sending Kim Do-yuk flying with a single punch. At the same time, Jin Do-il and Park Yong-go had already subdued the other two. But just as No Sung-yu thought the fight was over, Kim Do-yuk suddenly began shoving pills into his mouth like a madman. One of his lackeys tried to calm him down, only to be threatened and even forced to swallow the rest of the pills himself. Kim Do-yuk said, "Either way, losing meant a dead end for them all." With the drugs kicking in, Kim Do-yuk became even more ferocious, charging at No Sung-yu like a lunatic. No Sung-yu, unfazed, threw a punch straight at Kim Do-yuk's head, only to find it had no effect at all. Instead, Kim Do-yuk grabbed his skull in a vice-like grip and slammed it hard against the concrete floor, blood spraying instantly. Staring at the fallen No Sung-yu, Kim Do-yuk's rage was unsated. He kept smashing his head into the ground until No Sung-yu was a bloody, mangled mess, barely breathing. Just as Kim Do-yuk thought victory was his and raised his fist for the final blow, the half-conscious No Sung-yu suddenly grabbed his wrist and, in a flash, countered with an uppercut to the jaw, turning the tables completely. Kim Do-yuk was pinned beneath him, his face full of confusion. How could he lose after taking so many pills? No Sung-yu locked his arm around Kim Do-yuk's neck and said quietly, "Only when someone has something to protect can they truly become strong." Meanwhile, inside the nightclub, Lee Gil-soo, desperate to find senior No Sung-yu, accidentally drew the attention of the club manager, Dave. Dave immediately sent his men to surround him, and Lee Gil-soo had no choice but to take them all down in one go. To get information about No Sung-yu's whereabouts, he went after Dave himself. But to his surprise, Dave's reflexes were lightning fast. No matter how Lee Gil-soo attacked, Dave dodged with ease. Facing such a slippery opponent, Lee Gil-soo tried to corner him, but Dave used one of his lackeys' heads to block a punch and even took the chance to smash a bottle over Lee Gil-soo's arm. In an instant, Lee Gil-soo felt a sharp pain in his left eye. Glass shards had lodged themselves inside. Distracted, he was suddenly sent flying by a punch from Dave. After calming himself, Lee Gil-soo realized that his only option now was to use grappling techniques against this despicable man. He charged forward, grabbing hold of Dave's leg, thinking he could finally subdue him. But then, Lee Gil-soo's right arm suddenly went numb, losing all strength. Seeing this, Dave smirked triumphantly and effortlessly knocked Lee Gil-soo to the ground again. As Lee Gil-soo stared up in confusion, Dave raised his fist and proudly displayed a broken ring, revealing a hidden poison needle inside. At the same time, Park Yong-go was locked in a fierce struggle in the arena. The red-haired man, pumped full of illegal drugs, had become a terrifying brute, pinning Park to the floor and beating him mercilessly, giving him no chance to fight back. On the other side, Jin Do-il was also at a loss against his opponent. No matter how he attacked, the man seemed completely numb to pain. If anything, it was less endurance and more total insensitivity. Just as the man lunged with his mouth wide open, like a mutated zombie about to bite Jin Do-il, No Sung-yu, having just taken down Kim Do-yuk, arrived in the nick of time. He clamped one hand tightly around the man's throat, while with the other he hoisted up the red-haired guy who had attacked Park Yong-go. In the end, No Sung-yu personally dealt with both lackeys. A deafening cheer erupted in the arena at once. The host seized the moment and announced the start of the third round. But unexpectedly, before he could finish speaking, he was sent flying by a kick. The two fierce battles had already cost No Sung-yu too much time. He had to hurry back to take care of his brother. Facing the burly man trying to block his way, No Sung-yu knocked him out with a single punch, then warned the gamblers behind him. Anyone dissatisfied with the match being interrupted would end up like that guy just now. With that, he gathered Jin Do-il and Park Yong-go, ready to leave. Just then, Guan Tyran suddenly appeared on the stage, threatening coldly, "Trying to quit on your first day after signing the contract? Don't forget you still have debts to pay." No Sung-yu immediately replied that he didn't want to stay signed, didn't care about the payment for those 2 matches, and would pay off the debt gradually through part-time work. Guan Tyran stepped down from the stage, his tone icy as he said, "Sorry, the Party B can't terminate the contract without negotiating with Party A. If you won't comply, we'll have to settle this with force." As soon as he finished, he grabbed his fallen subordinate and hurled him fiercely at No Sung-yu. No Sung-yu blocked with both arms, furious that this guy would use his own men as weapons. He was about to throw the man back, only to find the space before him empty. By the time he realized what was happening, Guan Tyran had already appeared behind him like a ghost, saying coldly, "You will never leave this arena." After that, he ordered his men to clear all the gamblers out of the nightclub. A crowd surged out from inside, leaving Eyebrow Bro, who had been waiting outside, utterly perplexed. Anxious to figure out what was going on, he pleaded with the bouncer to let him in, but the bouncer stubbornly refused. Knowing he couldn't wait any longer, Eyebrow Bro clenched his fists, preparing to force his way in. But before he could act, 2 security guards suddenly grabbed hold of him. The bouncer grinned wickedly, raising his fist to teach him a lesson. Just as the punch was about to land, Jang Chong appeared out of nowhere, catching the fist squarely in his hand. With a hard squeeze, he crushed the bouncer's hand. In just a few swift moves, he took out the 2 thugs who had pinned Eyebrow Bro. The reason Jang Chong was able to arrive in time was that half an hour earlier, Jangmi had suddenly received a request from Lee Gil-soo, asking if she could help look after a child for a while. Worried something might happen, Jangmi asked his older brother Jang Chong to come along. When they arrived at the farm, Jang Chong felt a vague sense of unease. From what he knew, No Sung-yu would never hand his brother Won over to someone else so easily. Sure enough, after bursting into the house, Won tearfully complained that his brothers were all busy, they had promised to return but still hadn't come back. Hearing this, Jang Chong immediately hugged Won to comfort him, and at the same time noticed a Begzan Group business card lying by the bed. His heart tightened, and he told his sister to stay and look after Won. Then rushed to the nightclub using the address on the card. After taking care of most of the security, Jang Chong was just about to storm the lair. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Lee Gil-soo was being beaten up by Dave inside the club. Because his right hand had been injected with anesthetic, he couldn't fight back at all, only take Dave's savage blows. Dave grabbed him by the hair and demanded to know why he was there. Lee Gil-soo no longer concealed his intentions, he said outright that he was here to find Senior No Sung-yu. Dave let out a cold laugh after hearing this, saying the guy was probably at the arena by now, already beaten to a pulp and unrecognizable. Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo was furious. He swung his fist, wanting to ask for the location of the arena, but with his right hand crippled, he lost his balance and was instead knocked down by a punch from Dave. Then Dave casually grabbed a bottle of red wine. In this world, what he hated most was naive ideals of justice. For him, life had always been survival of the fittest, and he was willing to abandon anything to reach his goals. Without hesitation, Dave smashed the bottle over Lee Gil-soo's head. Lee Gil-soo collapsed instantly, left with only faint, shallow breaths. At that moment, a sudden ringtone sounded. Dave answered his phone and learned there was trouble at the arena. Lee Gil-soo struggled to raise his head, wondering if Senior had started fighting. He heard Dave say he was heading over as well. Lee Gil-soo's heart filled with anxiety. Gritting his teeth, he swore he couldn't let anything happen to his senior. He had to find a way to stop all of this. Just then, he suddenly remembered his recent experience climbing a cliff with his bare hands. The summit was within reach, but he was too exhausted to climb another inch. At the crucial moment, a hand grabbed him and pulled him up. When he saw it was Senior No Sung-yu, he thought he was saved. But unexpectedly, the next second, his senior suddenly let go, sending him tumbling down the 100-meter cliff. On the brink of death, he somehow unleashed a tremendous strength, clinging desperately to a protruding rock, and managed to save his own life. Only then did his senior reveal a rare smile, reminding him to never forget the feeling of this moment, the potential unleashed when a person stands at the edge of life and death. As long as there's even a sliver of strength left, no matter the situation, you can still turn the tables, and never give up until the very last moment. Thinking of this, Lee Gil-soo suddenly lunged at the departing Dave, coiling around him like a python, using his one good arm to lock the bastard's throat in a chokehold. Even as he was beaten to the brink of unconsciousness, he summoned every ounce of strength to protect those who mattered. No matter what, he could not let this bastard hurt anyone. Dave was completely caught off guard. Even after being wounded so badly, Lee Gil-soo could still muster such power. But Dave wasn't one to surrender easily. He tried to grab another bottle to strike back. Yet Lee Gil-soo gave him no chance, choking him until foam frothed from his mouth. Meanwhile, in the arena, Senior No Sung-yu, whom Lee Gil-soo desperately wanted to protect, had already been beaten within an inch of his life by Guan Tyran. Guan Tyran even pulled out a large jar of pills, intending to force them all down No Sung-yu's throat, to turn him into a slave of the Baeksan group. At that critical moment, the doors of the arena were blasted open by a powerful force. Jang Chong leapt down from the high platform. Today, he would show the Baeksan group what price they'd pay for messing with people from Yukmun Guan. With that, Jang Chong charged in first. To his surprise, Guan Tyran sprang onto the fighting stage, declaring that he wanted a head-on fight with the boss of Yukmun Guan, the strongest man here. Hearing this, Jang Chong didn't hesitate at all, launching a flurry of punches at Guan Tyran, but they were all easily dodged. Instead, he took a flying kick from Guan Tyran. Jang Chong hadn't expected that. The opponent was actually able to launch an attack from an utterly unexpected blind spot. Guan Tyran suddenly vanished from sight. In the next instant, a deep voice sounded behind Jang Chong, "Let me see what you're really capable of, that is, if you can keep up with my speed." With that, Guan Tyran moved like a ghost, launching a flurry of rapid attacks at Jang Chong from all directions, his speed so swift it was almost impossible to track. Jang Chong was forced onto the defensive at once. In a moment of inattention, he was sent flying by a punch, crashing awkwardly into the railing. Guan Tyran looked at him. "Should I give you a chance too?" In the arena, the Yukmun Guan High School's bubble fighters are practically a guaranteed box office draw. Hearing such nauseating words, rage boiled inside Jang Chong, and he launched a high kick straight at his opponent's head, sending the guy flying in an instant. That sudden, heavy blow put Guan Tyran on alert. He began to realize that Jang Chong's strength was far beyond the rumors. Guan Tyran knew he had to capitalize on his advantage in speed and strike first. But before he could seize an opening, Jang Chong landed another unexpected hit on him. Such overwhelming power and speed made Guan Tyran doubt himself for a moment. His mind flashed back to childhood, when he had followed his missionary father overseas, only to be caught in a brutal massacre by a criminal organization. After the slaughter, he was the sole survivor, locked away in a pitch-black room. As a child, clutching a short knife thicker than his own arm, he was forced to fight off a pack of starving, rabid dogs. That was his only way to survive. Years later, that ordeal had turned him into a savage, bloodthirsty beast. His strength grew, until no one could restrain him. When he faced the crime boss who claimed to be his father, he didn't hesitate to kill him, finally drawing a line under the past. He changed his identity, buried his old life, and returned to a hometown he could barely remember. But as a beast, hunting the weak had become his instinct. He believed that as long as he stood at the peak of power, he'd never suffer misfortune again. Yet now, Jang Chong's appearance seemed determined to drag him down from that height. That was something he would never allow. Guan Tyran immediately swallowed the pill hidden inside his gold necklace. In an instant, his energy surged, making him several times stronger than before. Faced with Guan Tyran's sudden transformation, Jang Chong was utterly confused. And in that split second of distraction, a heavy punch smashed into his face, sending him flying without any chance to defend himself. Before Jang Chong could recover, Guan Tyran attacked like a madman, his speed so blinding that Jang Chong simply couldn't react. Guan Tyran raised his fist and sent Jang Chong flying out of the ring with a single strike. Jang Chong lay motionless on the ground, as if dead. Guan Tyran immediately took out his phone, ready to report his victory to Tenchai. Just then, a voice suddenly sounded behind him. Jang Chong, who had been lying on the ground, was somehow back on his feet. "We're not done yet. Now things get interesting. Is that all you've got? Unleash another 100 moves if you like, but I'll show you what real Yukmun Guan strength looks like." Meanwhile, Lee Gil-soo had defeated Dave. Seeing blood all over the nightclub, he assumed that his senior had fought a fierce battle. Worried, he wanted to rush over and help them immediately. But now, his body was covered in wounds, and even walking was a struggle. Just as he was at a loss for what to do, Eyebrow Bro suddenly shouted and ran over, telling him not to worry. Senior Jang had already arrived. Those nightclub staff lying on the ground had all been dealt with by Senior Jang. Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo finally breathed a sigh of relief and got ready to go with Eyebrow Bro to find Senior Jang. But right at that moment, a few more stragglers from the nightclub popped up. Seeing this, Eyebrow Bro stepped forward without hesitation. He told Lee Gil-soo to rest for now, he would take care of these guys. Since they were both students from the Yukmun Guan, he naturally had to play his part to the end. As Eyebrow Bro entered combat mode, the second round between Jang Chong and Guan Tyran in the arena officially began. After several exchanges, Jang Chong realized that Guan Tyran was a textbook high-speed boxer. Someone like that, while still within a bearable range of strength, was extremely hard to catch with grappling techniques. If you weren't careful, you'd end up getting a harsh beating from him. Seeing Jang Chong turned into his personal punching bag, Guan Tyran's confidence soared to its peak. He had once dominated the whole school, standing at the pinnacle of power. But he quickly realized there was still something he lacked: money. In this society where you can't move an inch without cash, he had no choice but to start hustling. But before long, he got taught a lesson by a gang. Just when he thought he'd be trampled underfoot forever, someone appeared out of nowhere and saved him. That person showed him what a truly powerful organization looked like. Not only did they have strength in numbers, but they could also amass huge fortunes in special ways. At that person's invitation, he felt like he'd finally found his place and decisively joined the Baeksan group. So, in Guan Tyran's eyes, the once arrogant Yukmun Guan could never be a match for the Baeksan group. Watching Jang Chong get knocked down by him yet again, Guan Tyran urged him to just give up. Dragging this out would only make things worse. Jang Chong wiped the blood from his face, gave a broad grin, and then tore open his own shirt. After taking so many punches, he finally came up with a solution: give up on sight and rely solely on his senses to track the opponent's speed. This move completely enraged Guan Tyran, who launched a furious, whirlwind assault from every angle. Jang Chong gritted his teeth and endured, his mind echoing his master's words: when your eyes can't keep up with your opponent, use your heart to feel their movements. Abandon human fighting methods, become the fiercest beast from this moment on. As Guan Tyran's punches came flying again, Jang Chong dodged them with uncanny precision. Though he couldn't see a thing, he caught hold of his opponent's rhythm. Relying on sight always made him half a beat slow. Now, with his sharp senses, he could read Guan Tyran's habits and punching patterns, predicting his moves in advance. Not only did he dodge perfectly, but he landed his own punch squarely on Guan Tyran's face. That blow devastated Guan Tyran, and Jang Chong instantly regained control of the fight, unleashing his final, decisive strike. At that moment, with his face battered beyond recognition, Guan Tyran simply couldn't understand how he'd lost. Jang Chong, having heard this, tore the cloth from his eyes. He spoke sternly: while you need 100 moves, I only need one perfect attack. A man who stakes everything on his beliefs, and one who fights for desire, that's the difference between you and me. With that, he stomped hard on Guan Tyran's chest, issuing a warning: from today, this nightclub is closed. If I see you again, it'll mean war with Yukmun Guan. Meanwhile, Eyebrow Bro rescued the remaining nightclub lackeys, and hurried to the arena with Lee Gil-soo. No sooner had they arrived than they saw all three of their companions lying on the ground, badly injured, and the victorious silhouette of Senior Jang Chong. Lee Gil-soo couldn't imagine how horrible their fate would have been tonight without Senior Jang Chong. A few days later, the duel with Baeksan group felt like nothing but a dream. After waking from that dream, life gradually returned to normal. Eyebrow Bro got himself a new hairstyle he thought was outrageously cool. Senior No Sung-yu returned to the patrol squad, and was planning to move out of the farm, using several months' wages advanced from the barbecue shop owner to find a better place to live with his younger brother. It should have been a cause for celebration, but No Sung-yu's expression suddenly grew grim. He never imagined that the loan sharks would take advantage of his broken contact with his mother, falsify the account books, and trick him into thinking he'd been paying off her debt all along. No Sung-yu no longer blamed his mother for this. After all, money can cloud anyone's judgment. Maybe she had her own reasons. Just then, the little moving truck finally arrived. No Sung-yu invited Lee Gil-soo to come by for training now and then. After all, there was no telling when Baeksan Group might show up again. According to the patrol squad's intelligence, Baeksan Group's business extended far beyond just one arena. And that was the truth. With the nightclub out of commission, Guan Tyran, hoping for a comeback, took advantage of a cadre meeting at Baeksan Group's headquarters to conspire with Dave to secretly move some of the hidden medicines, planning to sell them for cash. But just as he thought his plan was flawless and pushed open the warehouse door, he discovered one of the Baeksan Group's 5 dragons, Tenchai, was already sitting atop a pile of medicine, waiting for him. Dave quickly urged Guan Tyran to escape, volunteering to stay behind and delay Tenchai. Guan Tyran had no choice but to run for now, hoping to rescue Dave when the chance arose. But Maria and Choi No-myun were already blocking the exit. Maria smirked and said, "Today's cadre meeting is mainly to decide the punishment for the losers, you know." Only then did Guan Tyran realize he'd fallen into a trap. Furious, he charged at them, intent on teaching them a lesson. But before he could even touch them, Maria sent him flying with a single kick, then turned him into a punching bag with her overwhelming attacks. Knowing he was already injured and that fighting on would only end in disaster, Guan Tyran decided he had to find a way to escape. But Choi No-myun was hot on his heels, knocking him to the ground with a single punch. Watching as blood spurted from his mouth, Choi No-myun said with a malicious grin, "What a shame. Your prized speed, looks like you'll never use it again." With that, he locked Guan Tyran's left leg tight in his arms. With Tenchai finishing the fight in a single move, he announced the punishment for Baeksan Group's traitor, Guan Tyran, His leg would be broken on the spot, condemning him to a life as a cripple, able to do nothing but take beatings. After some time, the injuries that Lee Gil-soo and his two friends had sustained had mostly healed. They were discussing going to the arena to stretch their muscles, when, unexpectedly, Senior Jang Chong appeared with a dark expression on his face. Amid the confused stares of the group, he walked straight up to Lee Gil-soo and said, "You seem to be getting along well with my sister. But talking things over isn't the Yukman Guan way. Let's settle this in the arena. I'm officially challenging you." News that Senior Jang would be fighting a freshman quickly spread throughout the venue, and everyone was eager to witness his strength once again. Meanwhile, Lee Gil-soo felt that things were looking grim for him, and he instantly sank into despair. Seeing the misery on Lee Gil-soo's face, Park Yong-go teased, "Don't tell me you're scared?" Lee Gil-soo replied with a bitter smile, "It's not that I'm afraid of getting beaten up, or of losing. Sparring with a senior, I can always learn something. It's just..." His face suddenly flushed. "I'm worried he won't let me see Jangmi anymore." Park Yong-go nearly choked on his own saliva when he heard that. "Wait, are you actually dating his sister?" He patted Lee Gil-soo on the shoulder and said, "Going into a fight with things so uncertain between you two, you're bound to lose out. You have to clear things up before the match." With total confidence, he added, "Trust me, I'm an expert when it comes to this stuff." Under Park Yong-go's guidance, Lee Gil-soo changed into a sharp new look, summoned his courage, and messaged Jangmi to invite her to meet at a cafe after school, bringing along a gift he'd picked out for his confession. Moved by Park Yong-go's enthusiastic help, Lee Gil-soo promised that, no matter how things turned out, he would treat him to a meal before they headed to the arena together. While waiting, Lee Gil-soo was so nervous he chugged cup after cup of coffee. When Jangmi finally arrived, he opened his mouth awkwardly, fumbling around in the corner of the sofa before suddenly lifting the gift he'd prepared, and stammered, "I just thought of you on my way here, so, this is for you." Only after saying it did he realize how incoherent he sounded. To his surprise, Jangmi was delighted when she saw the gift. "Gil-soo, how did you know I like piccolo?" Then, she took a gift out of her backpack and handed it to Lee Gil-soo, smiling brightly as she said, "You've been getting involved with some dangerous people lately, and I've been a little worried. This is like a talisman for me, I hope it can keep you safe." Lee Gil-soo accepted the gift in disbelief, his heart pounding. Could it be that Jangmi liked him too? The thought made him blurt out, "Jangmi, what's your ideal type?" But then, Lee Gil-soo suddenly received a piece of news he could hardly accept. Jangmi's ideal was someone strong, just like her brother. It was the complete opposite of Senior Jang. In an instant, Lee Gil-soo realized he really wasn't her type. He shot to his feet, his face darkening. Saying he had something to take care of, he told Jangmi he'd contact her later. Watching Lee Gil-soo dejectedly holding onto a utility pole, Park Yong-go looked puzzled. "So you didn't even confess? You just ran off?" Hearing this, Lee Gil-soo suddenly perked up and explained, "I want to earn Senior's approval first, become a steadfast man, and then stand by Jangmi's side." But just as the words left his mouth, something unexpected happened. A gang of riders suddenly appeared, brazenly launching a robbery, and of all things, they snatched away the gift Jangmi had just given to Lee Gil-soo. Lee Gil-soo was so furious he nearly exploded, ready to chase after them and take the gift back. At that moment, Park Yong-go grabbed his shoulder, brimming with confidence. "Don't worry, with me, the strongest rider, here, I guarantee I'll stop them for you." With that, Park Yong-go led Lee Gil-soo to lie in wait along the biker's only escape route. He sprang out in an instant, swinging a club and sending one of the riders flying. Before the rest of the gang could react, Lee Gil-soo had already lunged forward, grabbing the red-haired thug who took the gift. With a threatening glare, he growled, "If you don't want to die, hand it over right now." But to his surprise, the red-haired thug suddenly revved his motorcycle, flinging Lee Gil-soo off in a split second. Seeing the red-haired thug about to escape, Lee Gil-soo desperately grabbed onto the back seat of the motorcycle. The next second, the bike backfired loudly, forcing the red-haired thug to jump off to save himself. Noticing how recklessly Lee Gil-soo was fighting over such a small item, the thug smirked, held up the gift bag, and without hesitation tossed it into the river. "You want it so badly? Go get it yourself." The gift plunged into the water, and Lee Gil-soo was scared out of his wits. Not caring about anything else, he leapt off the bridge after the gift. Meanwhile, inside the fighting arena, all the classmates had gathered, anxiously waiting with Jang Chong for Lee Gil-soo to show up. Eyebrow Bro blamed himself, saying it was all his fault. He never should have let Lee Gil-soo go see Jangmi alone with Park Yong-go, and who knew what happened after the confession. As soon as the words left his mouth, Jin Do-il hurriedly clamped a hand over Eyebrow Bro's mouth, but it was already too late. News that Lee Gil-soo had gone to confess to Jangmi swept through the entire arena in an instant. When Jang Chong heard, He was furious, vowing to track down Lee Gil-soo and teach him a lesson. On the other side, Park Yong-go thought he dealt with all the bikers, but as he turned around, he spotted the red-haired one who'd slipped away. Seeing the red-haired thug, who was supposed to be Lee Gil-soo's target, about to escape, Park Yong-go broke out in a sweat, but couldn't find any trace of Lee Gil-soo anywhere. With no choice, he chased after the thug. And just as he left, Lee Gil-soo finally emerged from the water, anxiously scanning the area. At last, he spotted the gift Jangmi had given him lying in the grass nearby. He excitedly grabbed the bag, only to find it completely empty. Lee Gil-soo turned toward the deeper part of the river, and without hesitation, stripped off his clothes and shoes and dove in. No matter what, he had to find the gift from Jangmi. Fortunately, his persistence paid off. In a corner at the bottom of the river, he finally found the fallen box. Overjoyed, he broke through the water's surface, shouting in excitement. But just as he was about to swim back to shore, a sudden numbness seized his foot. He realized he was cramping. Lee Gil-soo immediately mustered all his strength to swim toward the bank, but quickly ran out of energy. Unable to hold on, he swallowed several mouthfuls of water, struggling and calling for help, sinking into despair. At that moment, Jang Chong suddenly appeared and pulled him out of the water. After being rescued, Eyebrow Bro and Jin Do-il rushed over to ask why he jumped into the river like that. They told him that if they hadn't heard his cries for help, he'd have drowned for sure. Lee Gil-soo recounted everything in detail to Senior Jang. Afterwards, he took out the gift Jangmi had given him. When he opened it, he found it was a whistle. When Jang Chong saw the whistle, he was stunned on the spot, because this whistle was the most precious thing he had given to his little sister when they were children.